Chapter 176. I bid 100,000 purple crystal coins. A deep voice suddenly sounded from the auction hall. Although the voice wasn't loud, it still spread throughout the auction hall. Hearing the bid of 100,000 purple crystal coins, everyone in the auction hall was stunned. Not only them, but even the people in the Yulan family's box were dumbfounded. 100,000 purple crystal coins. Although a fifth-rank magical beast was precious, it wasn't priceless. 70,000 purple crystal coins was already a very high price. 100,000 purple crystal coins was far more than a fifth-rank magical beast should be worth. Following the bid of 100,000 purple crystal coins, the entire auction hall became dead silent. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard. Only the heavy breathing of tens of thousands of people could be heard. Genshin, who was sitting in an inconspicuous corner, was also shocked by this voice. However, his heart was filled with excitement. As the seller, he naturally hoped that his item would sell for as high a price as possible. However, this time, the price had risen from 70,000 purple crystal coins to 100,000 purple crystal coins. This really surprised Genshin. Furthermore, what surprised Genshin the most was that the voice didn't come from the VIP box, but from a place not far from him. Genshin turned his head slightly and looked in the direction of the voice. In the end, his gaze fell on a person wearing a long gray robe. That person was an old man who looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His long black hair was coiled around his head like a flower bud, and there were some wrinkles on his old face. After a moment of silence, the entire auction venue broke out into a noisy discussion. Everyone couldn't help but look at the source of the sound. However, only a few people were able to capture the location of the person who made the bid based on the sound they just heard. The auctioneer standing on the stage was also shocked by this high price. After being stunned for a moment, he regained his senses. With an excited expression, he shouted with a trembling voice, 100,000 purple crystal coins! 100,000 purple crystal coins! Someone has bid 100,000 purple crystal coins. Are there any higher bids? In the private room of the Yulan family, the faces of several members of the Yulan family had turned ashen. However, no one said a word because even they were shocked by the high price. 100,000 purple crystal coins going once. Are there any higher bids? 100,000 purple crystal coins going twice. 100,000 purple crystal coins going thrice sold. As the auctioneer fiercely pounded the wooden mallet in his hand, the second-class magical beast, the Quick Cloud Beast, was finally bought by someone for the high price of 100,000 purple crystal coins. All right, this year's auction has officially come to an end. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We will meet again on this day next year. Now, all the guests who have won their bids, please head to the backstage to collect your items. The host, Garong, had a brilliant smile on his face. He had been hosting auctions in the Heavenly Phoenix auction house for dozens of years, and this year's auction was the grandest one he had ever hosted. This was because an item worth 100,000 purple crystal coins had been auctioned off by him. To an auctioneer like him, this was definitely a supreme honor. After the auction ended, the people who had won their bids left their seats and headed to the backstage to pay the corresponding amount of money to exchange for the items they had won. After a slight hesitation, Genshin also stood up and headed to the backstage of the auction house. He also had to go to the backstage to collect the money he had won from the two-class magical beasts. When Genshin arrived at the backstage of the auction house, there were already quite a few people gathered there. This was the place where the people who had won their bids could collect their money. More than 100 people consciously lined up here, holding a small token that was specially issued by the auction house as they waited quietly. Mr. Wu Yan, our manager Yulian, is waiting for you in the guest room. Please follow me. At this moment, a slightly aged voice sounded beside Genshin. The appraiser of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, old Mr. Huang, was standing beside Jianqin and speaking in a low voice. Because Jianqin's appearance was still that of a middle-aged man, old Mr. Huang was able to recognize him at a glance. Then I'll have to trouble old Mr. Huang to lead the way. Jianqin smiled and said politely. Old Mr. Huang did not waste any more words and turned around to walk inside. Jianqin also followed closely behind old Mr. Huang. However, just as Jianqin took a few steps, he suddenly stopped and turned his head slightly to look at the small door he had just entered from. He saw two people wearing gray robes walking side by side as they slowly walked out from the small door. Of the two people, one was an old man and the other was a middle-aged man. The old man was the one who had bid a high price of 100,000 purple crystal coins for the corpse of the Class 5 magical beast, Swift Cloud Beast. Two distinguished guests, please follow me. Just as the two of them appeared, a waiter immediately went up to greet them. Lead the way, the old man said indifferently. Following that, he followed the waiter and walked towards the stairs leading to the second floor. Wait. At this moment, a loud shout suddenly sounded. As soon as the voice sounded, several middle-aged men aggressively ran in from the small door and surrounded the two people in gray robes. This scene attracted the attention of all the people handling the transaction. Immediately, everyone turned their heads and looked at the scene with interest, as if they were waiting to see a good show. However, the waiter's expression did not change. This was not the first time he had seen such a scene. He tried to persuade them, Sirs, this is the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. Get lost! However, before the waiter could finish his words, he was fiercely pushed away by a man. The powerful force on his arm directly pushed the waiter's body back more than 10 meters. And finally, with a bang, the waiter fiercely slammed into the wall. His head made intimate contact with the hard wall, causing the waiter to faint on the spot. Traces of blood were left on the wall. Seeing this scene, Jianqin's expression changed slightly. A trace of strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. He obviously could not stand the rude and unreasonable behavior of these people. However, he did not lose his reason and rush up on the spot because he also knew that his current situation was not very optimistic. There must be many people asking about the Class 5 Magical Beast Corps. Chapter 177. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the surrounding people were shocked. They looked at the gray-robed elder in astonishment. They had never imagined that the person who had spent 100,000 purple crystal coins to purchase the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast would actually be this ordinary-looking elder. The gray-robed elder revealed a cold smile and said, That's right. I was the one who purchased it. The elder's tone was very calm. Hearing this, a trace of joy appeared in the eyes of the middle-aged man who spoke. He then sized up the ordinary-looking old man before him and sneered, Very good. You actually dare to go against our Yulan family. You must be tired of living. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and hand over the Class 5 demonic beast. Otherwise, you'll have a good time. It's actually someone from the Yulan family. This Yulan family is really arrogant. They actually dared to do such a thing in front of so many people in the auction house. Seeing the arrogant appearance of the Yulan family members, Jianqin, who was standing in the distance, frowned slightly. The gray-robed old man and the middle-aged man beside him exchanged glances. A cold smile appeared on their faces at the same time, following which the old man's seemingly ordinary soul gradually turned sharp. He stared straight at the middle-aged man who had just spoken and sneered. What does the Yulan clan amount to? Get out of my way. You're courting death. It seems that if I don't show you some power, you old thing won't listen to me obediently. The Yulan family members were instantly enraged. Following which, the middle-aged man stretched out his hand at lightning speed and grabbed the elder's neck. However, just as the middle-aged man's hand was halfway out, he suddenly felt his vision blur, following which he felt his neck tighten. he saw an old and withered hand. He didn't know when, but it had already tightly gripped his neck. The suffocating feeling coming from his throat made it impossible for the middle-aged man to breathe. The middle-aged man's eyes widened as he stared in disbelief at the withered hand that was gripping his neck. His heart was filled with shock because he hadn't sensed when the elder's hand had approached him. The old man grabbed the middle-aged man's neck with one hand. A cold smile appeared on his face as he said unhurriedly, "Young man, don't be too impulsive. If you lose your life, you can't blame anyone." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man casually waved his hand. The middle-aged man's cumbersome body was like a little chicken in the old man's hand. He was actually casually tossed far away by the old man. Finally, with a bang, with a loud thud, he slammed into the hard wall. The entire thick wall trembled violently for a moment. This sudden turn of events stunned the other members of the Yulon family. Looking at the middle-aged man who was lying on the ground, unable to get up, all of them were enraged. They immediately took out their own saint weapons and slashed at the old man with powerful saint force undulations. "Humph! You overestimate yourself." A cold light flashed in the eyes of the gray-robed, middle-aged man standing beside the old man, following which his hand suddenly emitted a fiery red light. The moment this fiery red light appeared, the surrounding temperature rapidly rose. The middle-aged man flicked his finger, and the fiery red light in his hand instantly shattered into pieces, following which sparks streaked across the sky like meteors, shooting towards the saint weapons that were slashing at him with lightning speed. Ding, 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 ding. When the sparks collided with the saint weapons, a few crisp sounds rang out. The saint weapons that the members of the Yulon family had used to slash at the old man were all broken into two. PFFF. A few of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their entire bodies seemed to have suffered heavy injuries. They staggered backwards. Their faces had become incomparably pale in an instant. There was not a trace of blood in them. A few of them could not stand steadily and immediately fell to the ground. They could not get up again. Seeing the broken saint weapons of the few of them, the onlookers to the side revealed expressions of schadenfreude. Everyone present understood that the arrogant members of the Yulon family were done for. Even if they managed to survive, they would be reduced to cripples living at the bottom of the Tianyuan continent. However, even more people were shocked by the strength displayed by the gray-robed, middle-aged man. With a flick of his finger, he had broken the saint weapons in the hands of several powerful people. Just how powerful was he? "Young master, leave this kind of person to this old man. There's no need for you to do it yourself." The gray-robed old man glanced at the fate of the members of the Yulon family and spoke to the middle-aged man in a rather respectful tone. The middle-aged man casually waved his hand and walked toward the unconscious waiter. At the same time, he indifferently said, "I really don't like these people. Just treat it as a small punishment for them. Whether they can survive or not will depend on their luck. To think that a puny Yulon family would be so arrogant. Humph." As he spoke, the middle-aged man arrived before the waiter and crouched down to check on his injuries. "Fortunately, it's only some superficial wounds. It's not a big problem." After a simple check, the middle-aged man let out a sigh of relief. He then extended his hand from his sleeve and placed a jade-green ring on his finger. The middle-aged man took out a bag of medicinal powder from his space ring and smeared it on the back of the waiter's head. The gray-robed elder shook his head helplessly when he saw the middle-aged man's actions. Although his young master was vicious and merciless towards his enemies, he had a compassionate and kind heart towards ordinary people. He had seen this kind of thing countless times. The Yulon family only has themselves to blame for ending up like this. The appraiser, old Mr. Huang, who stood behind Jianqin, sighed. He then said to Jianqin, "Mr. Wu Yin, please come with me." Jianqin nodded slightly. He glanced at the two gray-robed men deeply before following behind old Mr. Huang. However, His heart was not as calm as it seemed on the surface. I never thought that the two of them would be hidden experts, especially the middle-aged man. He's so powerful. If I have guessed correctly, the middle-aged man should be an Earth Saint Master at the very least, Jianchen sighed. Jianchan followed old Mr. Huang to the second floor of the auction house through another passageway. In the end, old Mr. Huang led him to an elegant guest room. As soon as he entered the guest room, Jianchen saw the supervisor of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Yu Lian, sitting on a sofa quietly. It seemed like she had been waiting for a long time. Mr. Wu Yin, you finally appeared after disappearing for so long. A faint smile appeared on Yu Lian's face as she gently spoke. Chapter 178. Jianchen remained calm as he looked at Urian's mature beauty. He smiled faintly. Manager Urian, the Class 5 magical beast has been successfully auctioned off. May I ask if you can hand me the money now? Urian smiled gently. Please wait for a moment, Sir Wu Yin. Although the Class 5 magical beast has been successfully auctioned off, it will still take some time to hand over the items. Jianchen nodded and did not say anything else. He sat there and waited quietly. He knew that the auction had just ended, and the people who had won the items had yet to pay for them. The auction would only hand over the money to the seller after they had collected their items. Urian could not help but frown as she looked at Jianchen, who was treating her like air. She finally showed some displeasure on her mature face. After a moment of hesitation, she said gently, Mr. Wu Yin, may I ask where you are from? Jianchen's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He smiled. I was born in a remote mountain village. I am a nobody. Even if I tell you, Manager Urian would not know, so there's no need to mention it. Afterwards, Urian and Jianchen began to chat in the quiet parlor. However, almost every question that Urian asked was related to Jianchen's identity. However, Jianchen was no longer a greenhorn. Even though Urian had tried to find out about Jianchen's identity from various sources, she was still very dissatisfied with the results. She had only managed to get a lot of useless information out of Jianchen. There was not a single piece of useful information. Looks like this Wu Yin is not a simple person either. It's not going to be easy to get some information out of him, Urian thought to herself as she massaged her temples with a throbbing headache. Jianchen chuckled inside when he saw the trace of annoyance on Urian's face. Dong, dong, dong. At this moment, a series of knocks suddenly came from the door. Upon hearing that, Urian sat up straight and reached out to press an inconspicuous button on the sofa. Immediately afterward, the door to the living room opened silently. Outside the door, a young lady in her 20s wearing a waiter's uniform was standing there. Manager Urian, appraiser Huang asked me to pass this space belt to you, the waiter whispered to Urian as he stood outside the door. Bring it over. Yes. After that, the waiter entered the parlor and handed the spatial belt to Urian. His gaze lingered on Jianchen's face for a while before he left. Urian checked the items in her spatial belt and then gently placed them on the table and smiled. Mr. Wu Yin, the total of 110,000 purple crystal coins from the auction of the Class 5 magical beasts are all inside. Please take a look. Upon hearing that, Jianchen took the spatial belt and checked the items inside. He saw that there were 11 neatly stacked piles of purple coins, each pile containing exactly 10,000 purple crystal coins. 11 stacks totaled exactly 110,000 purple crystal coins, no more, no less. After receiving the money, Jianchen had no intention of staying any longer. He stood up from the sofa and cupped his hands towards Urian, saying, Manager Urian, if there's nothing else, this one will take his leave first. After saying that, Jianchen walked towards the door. Mr. Wu Yin, please wait a moment, Urian suddenly called out to Jianchen. Jianchen stopped and turned to look at Urian as he asked indifferently, Manager Urian, is there something else? Urian hesitated for a moment before saying, Mr. Wu Yin, if you have a Class 5 magical beast core, Our Heavenly Phoenix auction house is willing to purchase it at a price that will satisfy you. Furthermore, we can also keep this a secret for you. Why don't you consider it?" Jianqin smiled apologetically and said, "I'm truly sorry, Manager Urian, but I don't have a Class 5 magical beast core." After saying that, Jianqin didn't wait for Urian to reply before opening the door and walking out. Seeing Jianqin gradually disappear from her sight, Urian sighed lightly and said, "I originally wanted to give you a reminder, but since you left in such a hurry, I can't be bothered to tell you. The large powers that have come this time are not simple. Whether you can safely survive this crisis will depend on whether or not you have the strength to do so." After walking out of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house, Jianqin stood at the entrance of the auction house and observed his surroundings. Sure enough, he discovered that there were many suspicious people in the surroundings of the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. Jianqin didn't stay for long and immediately walked towards the crowded street at his usual speed. However, before Jianqin had even walked out, his expression changed slightly. With his powerful senses, he could clearly sense that there were at least 100 gazes focused on him. Jianqin's heart sank slightly as he realized that something was amiss. Could it be that those powers have already found out that I was the one who brought the 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses to the auction house? Or could it be that the Heavenly Phoenix auction house revealed my identity? Although he realized that something was amiss, Jianqin didn't reveal the slightest trace of panic on his face. With his usual speed, he walked towards the crowded street as if nothing had happened. Following Jianqin's departure, the people scattered around the auction house also left their original positions and followed behind Jianqin. Sensing the actions of the people behind him, Jianqin couldn't help but reveal a cold smile on his face. The blood that had been dormant in his body for a long time also began to boil. Ever since his strength had reached the high-level Saint Master level, Jianqin hadn't fought with anyone. Now he also wanted to test how many moves a great Saint Master could take from him after reaching the high-level Saint Master level. "Your Excellency, please wait." Right at this moment, several black-clothed middle-aged men suddenly blocked Jianqin's path. Jianqin stopped his footsteps and looked indifferently at the middle-aged men blocking his path. He said, "Is there a problem?" One of the middle-aged men faintly smiled and said, "We are from Phoenix Sun City's Haiming clan. Your Excellency, our Haiming clan has no ill intentions towards you. We only wish to invite you to our Haiming clan as a guest." Haiming clan. Hearing this, Jianqin's heart was slightly moved. During these days in Phoenix Sun City, he had clearly heard of the Haiming clan. They were a local power of Phoenix Sun City, and their strength wasn't weak. They were one of the 3 great clans of Phoenix Sun City. "Many thanks for the Haiming clan's invitation, but I have important matters to attend to. It is truly inconvenient for me to be a guest." Jianqin tactfully declined. Chapter 179. Jianqin smiled faintly and cupped his hands. "Thank you for your kind intentions, but you don't have to worry about the current situation. I will take care of it myself." "Humph. Wu Yin, don't be so stubborn. Right now, various powers have gathered in Phoenix City, and your identity is no longer a secret in their eyes. There are more than one family eyeing you right now. If you don't cooperate with us, the only one who will suffer is you. If things go wrong, you might even lose your life here." The middle-aged man from the Black Underworld clan sneered. Jianqin's expression didn't change in the slightest as he said indifferently, "Then how do you want me to cooperate with you?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man in black was delighted. From these words, he already believed that Jianqin was willing to obediently follow them back to the Black Underworld clan. Although this thought flashed through his mind, the middle-aged man in black's expression didn't change. He said in a deep voice, "Follow us back to the Black Underworld clan immediately. Otherwise, when all their experts arrive, even our Black Underworld clan won't be able to save you." Jianqin's eyes flashed with a trace of imperceptible ridicule. Could it be that if I follow you back to the Black Underworld clan, your black underworld clan will definitely be able to save me? Didn't you just say that there are many powers eyeing me this time? Could it be that your black underworld clan alone can resist all these powerful powers coming from all directions? The middle-aged man smiled confidently. That's right. I admit that each of those powers are very powerful. Even compared to our black underworld clan, they aren't much weaker. Some of them are even stronger than our black underworld clan. But don't forget, our black underworld clan is a local power in Phoenix City. Moreover, we have already secretly allied with several other powers in Phoenix City. As long as you are willing to follow us back to the black underworld clan, you will definitely be fine. Oh, so that's how it is. Jianchen nodded slightly as if he had suddenly understood. Hurry up and follow us. If you are late, it will be too late. Our people can only delay them for a moment. If they rush over, then the situation will be terrible. The middle-aged man thought that Jianchen had agreed to return to the black underworld clan with them, so he took the lead and walked forward. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly stopped. He turned around and stared at Jianchen, who was standing there motionlessly. He couldn't help but frown. Why aren't you leaving? Jianchen's face was full of confusion. Where are we going? Hearing Jianchen's words, the middle-aged man in black knew that things wouldn't go so smoothly. However, he still said, where else can you go? Of course, you're going back to the black underworld clan with us. Do you want to die? But I didn't say I was going with you, Jianchen said innocently. Hearing this, the faces of the black underworld family members changed. The middle-aged man's face also suddenly turned gloomy. He stared at Jianchen with a cold gaze as he said in a deep voice, Wu Yin, you're toying with us. Jianchen chuckled. I'm not toying with you. Did you hear me say I was going to the black underworld clan with you? The middle-aged man took a deep breath before letting out a long breath. He stared at Jianchen with a fierce gaze as he sneered in anger. Good, good, good. Wu Yin, since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, don't blame us for being impolite. With that, the middle-aged man gave a signal to the other black-clothed people with his eyes. He shouted, Time is of the essence. All of you go together and capture him. Before he even finished speaking, the middle-aged man charged at Jianchen. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a threatening cold light. Powerful saint force surged out from his right hand and quickly condensed into a 4 chi long and 2 fingers wide silver white sword. Jianchen was very clear about the strength of the black-clothed people in front of him. Aside from the middle-aged man who had the strength of a great saint master, the rest of them were only high saint masters. This kind of lineup was not a threat to the current Jianchen. Seeing the middle-aged man charging at him, Jianchen's light wind sword suddenly emitted a layer of hazy but sharp sword chi. However, just as Jianchen was about to stab out with his sword, a loud laughter that shook the buildings on both sides of the street came from behind him. Haha, your black underworld clan's people sure move fast. Following the voice, a huge sword chi formed from pure energy shot out from behind and headed straight for the black-clothed, middle-aged man who was charging at Jianchen. The sudden change. The middle-aged man immediately became stern. He could not help but sigh inside when he sensed the power of the incoming sword chi. He knew that he had lost his chance to capture Jianchen. Immediately after, the black-clothed, middle-aged man came to a stop. Powerful saint force surged out from his hands and formed a large 2-handed sword. Carrying a surging amount of saint force, he slashed at the sword chi that was coming at him. Seeing this, Jianchen lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and gracefully flew back a few meters. Boom! Just as Jianchen retreated, a loud sound rang out from the collision of energy. The powerful shockwaves formed a fierce gale that howled in all directions. Many of the shops on both sides of the street were affected by the shockwaves and became a mess. The people on the street began to circulate their saint force. Without any hesitation, they quickly retreated into the distance. On the Tian-Yuan continent, where battles could happen at any time, the people who grew up here were already used to living like this. As a result, there was no trace of panic or fear on the faces of the people on the street. When the shock waves of energy dissipated, the black-clothed, middle-aged man from the Black Underworld clan was still standing where he had been before. However, his face had become serious. At the same time, a large group of people quickly rushed over from Jinshin's front and back. Even the buildings on both sides of the street could be seen leaping over. They were all rushing in the direction of Jinshin. In just a few breaths of time, the entire street was completely surrounded by hundreds of people. Even the roofs of the buildings on both sides were filled with people dressed in different attire. Unrelated personnel, leave immediately. As this voice rang out, the people who were stuck in the street didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They quickly left through a path opened up by the crowd. Chapter 180. At this moment, an old man wearing a large red robe walked out of the crowd. He swept his eyes over the several hundred people that had already filled the entire street. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "It sure is lively here. All the influential forces within 1,000 miles have actually gathered here. How rare, how rare. This old man hasn't seen a scene like this for many years." "Humph. Old bastard Fanping, why aren't you staying in your Qing clan? Why have you come to Fengyang City for no reason?" An old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion stood high up on a roof as he shouted at the old man in red robes. Hearing this, the old man called Old Devil Fan Ping coldly smiled. He looked at the old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion standing on the roof and said, "Kriansha Huang, since you can come to Fengyang City, why can't I, Fan Ping, come?" "Humph, Old Devil Fan Ping, I still haven't properly settled the debt from 5 years ago with you. Why don't we use this opportunity to settle this once and for all?" Krianshu Huang's eyes were cold as he stared at Old Devil Fan Ping. The cold, killing intent in his voice was not concealed at all, and many people present could clearly feel it. That's right. The debt from 5 years ago should indeed be settled. The old man in red robes slightly muttered to himself. As he spoke, powerful saint force surged out of his hand and quickly condensed into a 2-foot-long curved blade. Seeing that the situation between the two was becoming more and more serious, a middle-aged man standing beside the old man in red robes took a step forward. He arrived beside the old man in red robes and said, "Guest Fan Ping, now is not the time to settle the grudge between the two of you. Why don't we settle the matter at hand first before settling the grudge between the two of you?" The old man in red robes nodded slightly and said, "Fine. Kriansha Huang, right now is not the time to settle the grudge between the two of us. Let's settle the matter at hand first before settling the grudge between the two of us." The white-haired old man glanced at Jinshin. He knew in his heart that this was not the time to settle personal grudges. He snorted coldly and said, "Then I'll let you go for now." At this moment, several dozen figures stepped on the buildings on both sides of the street from the distance. They rapidly approached this place. From their formation, it was clear that they did not belong to the same organization. As these people approached, the people standing on the houses on both sides of the street made way for them. Following that, a few people landed on the roof of the house. All of their gazes landed on Jianshin, who was trapped in the middle, and one of them spoke out. "I think this must be Master Wu Yin." Jianshin turned his head and saw that the speaker was a middle-aged man in a white robe. The middle-aged man had short hair that was only an inch long, and there was a small scar on his resolute face. Jianshin said, "That's right, I am Wu Yin. I wonder why you've mustered such a large force to intercept me." "Ha, Master Wu Yin." This old man, "May I ask if you are the one who auctioned off the 2 corpses of the 5th rank magical beasts?" The red-robed old man asked with a smile. Jianshin could not help but smile. "I never thought that a nameless junior like me would be able to attract the attention of so many organizations. They actually investigated this matter so thoroughly." "That's right. I was the one who auctioned off the 2 corpses of the 5th rank magical beasts. Even though he was facing various powerful organizations, Genshin did not show the slightest bit of fear. Even after being surrounded by several hundred people, he still maintained a calm and composed expression. Master Wu Yin, I am the Vice Pavilion Master of the Wandering Cloud, Sword Pavilion, Zhou Tong. Since you possess the corpses of the 5th rank magical beasts, the monster cores of the 2 corpses should be in your possession as well. Our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion is willing to offer a price that will satisfy you and purchase one of the 5th rank monster cores. I wonder if Master Wu Yin is willing to part with it? Of course, if Master Wu Yin is willing to sell one of the 5th rank monster cores to us, our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion will be your friend in the future. If Master Wu Yin encounters any trouble, you can also look for our Wandering Cloud Sword Pavilion to help you resolve it. I wonder if Master Wu Yin is willing? Zhou Tong stood on the roof and said with a smile. Just as Zhou Tong's voice fell, a tall man with tan skin opened his mouth. Master Wu Yin, we are from the Yang Gate. I don't like to be wishy-washy, so I'll be frank with you. Of the 2 5th rank magical beasts in your possession, our Yang Gate would also like to purchase one of them. The price will definitely satisfy you. I wonder if Master Wu Yin is willing to buy one of them for our Yang Gate. Seeing that there were already 2 groups that wanted a Class 5 monster core, the other groups did not want to fall behind. Mr. Wu Yin, we are from the Yulan clan. Although our Yulan clan is not a large clan on the Tianyuan continent, there is still no one in Flaming Cloud City who dares to not give us some face. As long as Master Wu Yin is willing to sell a Class 5 monster core to our Yulan clan, we can guarantee that Master Wu Yin will stay comfortably in Flaming Cloud City. There will definitely be no one who dares to cause trouble for you, said a middle-aged man in luxurious robes from the Yulan clan. Mr. Wu Yin, we are from the Mu Tian clan. Mr. Wu Yin, we are from the Caldel clan. Many of the representatives present all spoke up, wanting to purchase a Class 5 monster core from Genshin. Genshin bitterly smiled when he saw that there were at least a dozen people present. He said, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint everyone. I don't have a Class 5 monster core on me. Although I did auction off the 2 Class 5 magical beasts, I didn't kill them. I just picked them up in the wilderness. There's no need to hide it. The corpses of Class 5 magical beasts are extremely precious. Even Heaven's Saint Masters can't abandon them. Moreover, we've already observed from the corpses that the 2 Class 5 magical beasts had killed each other. After they were both injured, someone else took advantage of them. Moreover, we can clearly see from the wounds that the person who took advantage of them was not very powerful. Otherwise, he would not have needed to make such a large wound when he took out the monster core. This person must be Mr. Wu Yin without a doubt, an old man said with a chuckle. From the looks of it, it was as if he was having a very friendly conversation with someone. Chapter 181. Now that the situation had developed to this point, Genshin was clear that unless he allowed them to search his body, they would definitely not believe his one-sided words. And to have them search his spatial belt was absolutely impossible. Not to mention the 2 Class 5 monster cores that were quietly lying there. Just the Class 4 monster cores and a large pile of purple crystal coins in his spatial ring would cause many of them to have evil intentions. Right now, Genshin already understood that there was no point in continuing to hide it. Although the other party had the advantage in numbers, he was not afraid. Genshin swept his gaze around. His powerful divine sense allowed him to easily capture dozens of powerful auras in the surroundings. He then smiled indifferently and said, Since everyone has already guessed it, then there is no need for me to hide it. That's right, the Class 5 monster cores are indeed on me, but there are only 2 of them. I wonder how you will distribute the 2 Class 5 monster cores with so many of you here. Genshin's words immediately caused the hundreds of people present to hesitate. The value of a Class 5 monster core was definitely above the corpse of a Class 5 monster core. Regarding the Class 5 Monster Corps, no one present was willing to give it up so easily. However, they also knew that there were only 2 Class 5 Monster Corps, and there were more than a dozen forces present. Every one of them was a big shot in their own right. Even if there was a difference in strength, it would not be too big. So to distribute the 2 Class 5 Monster Corps would be a difficult problem. For a moment, the atmosphere of the entire street became a little strange because of Genshin's words. Many people's eyes flashed with a trace of sternness, and when they looked at those who had conflicts with them, their eyes were filled with killing intent. However, this atmosphere did not last for long before it was broken by an old voice. Mr. Wu Yin, as for how to distribute the monster cores, we will naturally discuss this matter after this matter is over. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you should take out the Class 5 monster cores. Genshin looked towards the source of the voice and saw that the speaker was an old man in a white robe. The old man was relatively short and could only reach Genshin's chest at most. His face was very old and was covered with wrinkles. However, his eyes were bright and full of spirit. Although the old man's tone was flat, the meaning behind his words made Genshin very unhappy. Genshin sneered and met the old man's flat gaze. He said, "Sir, I'm sorry. I want to keep these 2 Class 5 monster cores for myself. I'm not selling them." Genshin emphasized the last 2 words. His tone was resolute and decisive, leaving no room for negotiation. When Genshin said the words, "not selling," everyone's expression changed slightly. Their gazes towards Genshin became cold and gloomy. Among them, there were many people who did not bother to conceal their killing intent. If not for the fact that there were over a dozen forces eyeing the Class 5 monster cores at the same time, causing the situation to become complicated, these people would not be so polite to Genshin. They would have already snatched them. Spending money to buy Class 5 monster cores was not their intention at all. Mr. Wu Yin, if you keep the 2 Class 5 monster cores, it will only bring you trouble. If you don't handle it well, you might even get yourself killed. You have to choose carefully. The one who spoke was a young man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in a green robe embroidered with golden threads. He was from the Muda family. That's right, Mr. Wu Yin. It's not appropriate for you to keep the Class 5 monster cores. You should sell them to us. The people from the Jia, Luo family said. After that, the other forces also began to ask Genshin to sell the monster cores to them. However, no one gave a specific price. Genshin knew how precious the 2 Class 5 monster cores were. Moreover, he had over 100,000 purple crystal coins in his spatial belt. He did not lack money at all. Therefore, he would not sell them. Genshin cupped his hands apologetically and said, "Everyone, I'm sorry. I'm not selling the Class 5 monster cores. I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't accompany you." After saying that, Genshin directly walked forward. He seemed to be casually walking, but he was already on guard. He was prepared to take action at any time. "Humph, you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Genshin's actions angered quite a few people. Immediately, several Saint Masters rushed towards Genshin under the signal of their leader. They tried to capture Genshin. The actions of these people seemed to have ignited a fuse. When they moved, the other forces also rushed out. A portion of these people rushed towards Genshin, while the other portion went to stop the others who wanted to capture Genshin. At this time, the leaders of the various forces were very clear that if they wanted to obtain the Class 5 monster cores, the most direct method was to capture Genshin. With regards to Genshin's strength, these great Saint Masters had already seen it clearly. He was only a high-level Saint Master. In these forces, he could only be considered a decent fighter. Therefore, they did not put him in their eyes. Seeing the people rushing towards him, Genshin's face revealed a cold smile. His eyes flashed with killing intent. Although the forces behind these people were not to be trifled with, if he did not retaliate after being bullied, then he would not be Genshin. Moreover, Jianchen was not someone who was afraid of trouble. The silver-white light wind sword appeared in Jianchen's right hand. With a flash of silver light, the light wind sword pierced towards the first group of people. Jianchen's sword was incomparably fast. The few Saint Masters did not expect Jianchen's sword to be so fast. It was so fast that they could not even see it clearly. In the end, before they could even react, the light wind sword had already pierced through their throats. Unexpectedly, not a single one of them was able to dodge. After reaching the high level of Saint Master, Jianchen's physique and battle prowess had increased by leaps and bounds. Unless it was someone with wind-attributed saint force, very few Saint Masters would be able to dodge his swift sword. In the blink of an eye, several Saint Masters had died under Jianchen's sword. Jianchen's sudden display of strength caused the people who wanted to capture Jianchen to turn pale with fright. They immediately became vigilant and took out their saint weapons. Even so, they did not slow down in the slightest. Chapter 182. Following the flash of the silver sword, 3 of the people who were charging towards Jianchen had their throats slit by the light wind sword. At this moment, the other people who were close to Jianchen all swung their saint weapons at Jianchen, bringing along powerful saint force with them as they slashed at him. Jianchen didn't even bother to look at the saint weapons coming at him from behind. It was as if he had a pair of eyes on the back of his head. He just tilted his body slightly and dodged the attacks of the saint weapons. Ding! Not only did the saint weapons not hit Jianchen, but because they were all aiming at the same target, the saint weapons actually collided with each other in midair. Following the sound of metal clashing, the saint weapons collided with each other, creating a visible shockwave that spread out in all directions. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Taking advantage of the moment when the saint weapons collided, the light wind sword in his hand once again formed a blurry sword shadow that enveloped the people around him. The sharp sword tip was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, lightly cutting across the throats of the saint weapons, leaving behind a faint trace of blood as it mercilessly reaped their lives. In less than a breath's time, 10 Saint Masters had already died under Jianchen's sword. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a dense killing intent as the light wind sword's blurry sword light became even denser. Just as Jianchen was about to continue killing the remaining people, a loud shout suddenly rang out. "Stop!" Hearing this shout, the people who were still charging towards Jianchen immediately stopped. At this time, the people who had their throats slit by Jianchen all fell to the ground at the same time. What a fast sword! This sword is so F***king fast. In the crowd, many people with extraordinary eyesight let out cries of surprise. Among them, there were quite a few Saint Masters who could clearly see Jianchen's sword. However, without exception, all of them were shocked by the lightning-fast speed of the sword. This was because they all knew that even if they were facing such a fast sword, they would still have to be careful. Otherwise, if they weren't careful, they would lose their lives. At this moment, the Saint Masters who originally looked down on Jianchen completely changed their gazes towards Jianchen. It was the kind of gaze one would only have when facing an opponent of the same level. When they saw those people fall to the ground in the blink of an eye, the expressions of the remaining people who only had sacred expert strength all changed greatly one after another. Their expressions all became a bit grave. In that instant just now, they could only catch a few streaks of silver-white light flashing past. They didn't see how those people were killed at all. Jianchen stood in the middle of the corpses with his sword in his right hand. His blood-stained sword was pointed towards the ground as he calmly looked around and said, "If you want to steal something from my hands, it won't be an easy task. At the very least, I will make you pay an extremely heavy price." Jianchen's words made the group of people look at each other. A person who only had the strength of a high-level Saint Master not only didn't panic in the slightest when facing hundreds of people, but instead spoke such arrogant words, especially when there were quite a few Saint Masters among these hundreds of people. If these words were to be said, perhaps no one would believe it. Although Jianshin's words sounded a bit arrogant, surprisingly, no one dared to say anything. Even those who had the strength of a Saint Master were no exception. Every single one of them remained silent, because the corpses of the Saint Masters on the ground were very good proof. Clap, clap, clap. An old man standing on the roof clapped his hands and said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Wu Yun truly has great skills. You actually made all of us misjudge you. Admirable, admirable." Jianshen smiled indifferently and didn't reply to the old man's words. He said, "Everyone, do you still want to steal the thing in my hands?" As soon as Jianshen's voice fell, a middle-aged man said with a gloomy face, "Humph. Don't think that you can look down on the world just because you have some strength. Wu Yin, you actually dared to kill my Yulan family's people. Today, if you don't give my Yulan family an explanation, don't even think about leaving this place. Mr. Wu Yin, our Muda family, also had a few people who died in your hands. They were all outstanding talents in our family and were highly valued by the patriarch. If you don't give us an explanation for this matter, then it will be very difficult for us. Our patriarch's anger isn't that easy to deal with." An old man from the Muda family said with a sinister smile on his face. Hearing the words of these two parties, the rest of the powers looked optimistic and no one retreated. Although Jianshin's strength had shocked all of them, it wasn't enough to make them think of retreating. After all, a Fifth Order Monster Corps was too tempting. The only problem now was that there were too many powers present. 2 Fifth Order Monster Corps were simply too difficult to distribute. As for Jianshin, although his strength had gained everyone's attention, it wasn't enough to make them feel apprehensive. Jianshin's gaze gradually became sharp. He already understood that today's battle was unavoidable. Coldly laughing, he said, "Since that's the case, then I'll give you an explanation right now." As soon as his voice fell, the light wind sword in Jianshin's hand suddenly exploded with a silver light. The intense and sharp sword qi spread through the air, causing the people who were 10 meters away to feel a faint pain on their skin. It was as if there were thousands of swords pressing against their bodies. The tip of Jianshen's foot lightly tapped the ground, and his body floated forward like a ghost. It was as if the short distance of a dozen meters didn't exist in front of him. In an instant, he had crossed the distance and appeared in front of the Yulan family members. Under the control of his arm, the light wind sword transformed into a sky full of sword shadows that enveloped the Yulan family members. Towards the Yulan family, Jianshin had long since disliked them. Therefore, he was the first to make an example of them. "Everyone, be careful!" The leader of the Yulan family shouted, and a huge sword appeared in his hand. Ignoring the sword shadows that filled the sky, he brandished his huge sword and slashed in a certain direction. Ding! With a crisp sound of collision, the large sword and a slender long sword that was only 2 fingers wide collided with each other. A powerful ripple of energy spread out from the point of contact, forming a visible ripple of energy that rapidly spread out in all directions. In the end, the ripple of energy slammed into the buildings on both sides of the street. Suddenly, the hard walls made of stone were shaken violently by this energy ripple, and traces of dust splashed out from them. Just as the 2 saint weapons clashed, Jianshin immediately put away his light wind sword. Using the tip of his foot, he quickly twisted his body and turned into a ghost, going around the saint weapon, wielding the great sword at an extremely fast speed. He shot behind the saint weapon, wielding the great sword. At this moment, the Yulan family's members were all on guard. Seeing Jianshin rushing towards them, the faces of the people standing at the front became serious. However, their movements were not slow either. Powerful saint force covered their weapons as they swung them towards Jianshin. Chapter 183. With the light wind sword's extremely fast movement speed, Jianshin's silvery sword had already turned into a thin ray of light. Even a great Saint Master would have to be careful when dealing with it. To a Saint Master, this kind of speed was definitely fatal. The light wind sword swept through the throats of several Saint Masters from the Yulan family, without the slightest bit of resistance. In an instant, it cut through their main arteries. Meanwhile, those sacred experts could only see a streak of silver-white radiance flash past extremely quickly. Quite a few of them didn't even have time to react before they felt a wave of slight pain from their throats. Then, a wave of powerful suffocation spread, and soon after they fell to the ground. Jianqin continuously shuttled through the Yu Lan family's group. As the silvery white light wind sword continuously turned into blurry sword images, people from the Yu Lan family could be seen clutching their throats in pain as they fell to the ground. Wherever Jianqin passed by, people would fall one after another. Among these Saint Masters, there were very few who could dodge Jianqin's swift sword. In less than 2 breaths of time, close to 20 people from the Yu Lan family had their throats slit with a single slash. Because of the speed and precision of his sword, Jianqin was able to kill people at an extremely fast speed. For those who were at most on the same level as him, he was able to kill them in one strike. During this short period of time, the great Saint Masters from the Yu Lan family had finally returned. However, when they saw that nearly 20 of their family members had died in less than 2 breaths of time, their eyes immediately became bloodshot. These Saint Masters were the core strength of their family. Moreover, they had only brought 50 people with them this time. To them, half of them had died in less than 2 breaths of time. To them, this was definitely a cruel matter that they could not accept. "You're courting death." "Wu Yin, don't even think of leaving today." An old man and a middle-aged man roared as they leapt off the roof and charged at Jianqin. The saint weapons in their hands emitted surging pulses of energy as they cut through the air with an ear-piercing sound, swinging towards Jianqin at an extremely fast speed. On the ground, the middle-aged man who had clashed with Jianqin before roared out furiously as well. He wielded his sword with both hands as he charged at Jianqin. 3 great Saint Masters. Feeling the powerful auras of the 3 Saint Masters and the powerful saint force fluctuations from their saint weapons, Jianqin revealed a cold smile. If Jianqin was still a Saint Master, 3 great Saint Masters would already be able to give him a lot of pressure. Unfortunately, Jianqin's strength had already reached the Saint Master level and was only an arm's length away from becoming a Saint Master. Compared to a Saint Master level Saint Master, his strength was several levels. Saint Masters were stronger than Saint Masters. Even Saint Masters. The light wind sword turned into a blur as it rapidly pierced out. The high-speed vibrations produced by the sword created a melodious sword cry. In just a short moment, Jianqin had already pierced out more than 10 times, colliding with the incoming saint weapons. The sounds of metal clashing against metal had already become one, as each of the 3 saint weapons were pierced by the light wind sword multiple times in the blink of an eye. After 10 or so strikes, the 3 saint weapons were stopped in their tracks. Their seemingly powerful attacks were easily neutralized by Jianqin's 10 or so strikes. However, the saint weapons' owners were not discouraged. The saint chi that was emitted from their saint weapons increased by a bit as they once again slashed towards Jianqin. Even though Jianqin was only a high-level Saint Master, facing the attacks of 3 great Saint Masters, he was not afraid at all. Instead, his aura soared to the heavens as the light wind sword in his hand once again became a blur as it pierced out like lightning towards the 3 saint weapons. Although Jianqin could also dodge the attacks, Jianqin wanted to use these 3 great Saint Masters to test his own strength. After all, this was the first time he had fought against a great Saint Master since he had become a high-level Saint Master. He wanted to use these people to test his limits. The 2 light wind sword and the 3 saint weapons that were completely disproportionate in size continued to fiercely clash against each other. As the weapons collided, the energy ripples that were created continued to spread out in all directions. Under the continuous impact of the energy ripples, the buildings on both sides of the street began to crack like a spider web. Moreover, the cracks quickly spread out into the distance. These buildings and shops had already been emptied out long before the battle began, so there was no need to worry about innocent people getting hurt. As for the hundreds of people who were still crowded at both ends of the street, all of them retreated a certain distance, leaving enough space for the few of them to fight. Seeing how Jianqin, who was clearly only a high-level Saint Master, was actually able to fight evenly against 3 great Saint Masters who were much stronger than him by himself. The shock in the eyes of the other great Saint Masters, watching from the side, became heavier and heavier. Practically all of their faces were filled with disbelief. This Wu Yun really isn't simple. Although he only has the strength of a high-level Saint Master, the battle strength he can display is actually this strong. Not only is the speed of his sword incomparably fast, but it is also extremely accurate. In the time it takes for others to strike once, his sword would have already struck twice or thrice. Moreover, his movements are as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest hesitation. His sword moves are practically flawless, making it impossible for others to find any openings. Sigh. Just this battle experience alone is already much better than ours. An old man standing on the roof sighed. It seems like this Wu Yun has experienced many more life and death battles than we have. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to have such ingenious battle experience. You have to know that this kind of battle experience isn't something that can be taught. Only those who have truly walked on the edge of life and death will gradually understand it. The Vice Pavilion Master of the Flowing Cloud Sword Pavilion also had a serious expression as he spoke in a deep voice. The most important thing is that the speed at which he strikes is just too fast. Is this a special battle skill? The eyes of many people present lit up when they heard the word battle skill. Not only were battle skills extremely precious on the Tianyuan continent, they were also extremely rare. Even many of the organizations present did not have a single low-level battle skill. Even if they did, only the core members of the clan or the leaders of the clan would have the ability to learn it. To them, the word battle skill was definitely more enticing than Class 5 monster cores. The sword technique Wu Yun displayed is definitely an extremely profound battle skill. Otherwise, with his strength that is definitely no more than high-level sacred expert level, how could he display such speed? Almost at the same time, everyone present agreed with this theory. This was because they really could not find a better and more suitable explanation for what was happening before them apart from battle achievements. Chapter 184. At this moment, many of the great Saint Masters who were watching from the side felt their blood begin to boil. Because of the enticement of a battle skill, many of them couldn't help but want to rush over and snatch the item from Jianqin's hands. Although many of them had such thoughts, none of them made a move. None of them were fools. Seeing that Jianqin was able to fight evenly with the 3 great Saint Masters, they all knew that Jianqin's strength wasn't as simple as it appeared on the surface. Right now, almost everyone was holding on to the idea of letting the great Saint Masters from the Yulan family exhaust Jianqin's Saint Force. This was because Saint Force was the source of a martial artist's energy. Once too much Saint Force was used up, it would directly affect one's battle prowess. At that time, if they wanted to snatch the item from Jianqin's hands, it would be much easier. Jianqin and the 3 great Saint Masters fought for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. During this time, Jianqin was completely fighting the 3 great Saint Masters head-on. Unless he had no other choice, he didn't even try to dodge their attacks. As for the 3 great Saint Masters from the Yulan family who were fighting with Jianqin, they became more and more shocked. Their hearts were already filled with shock and disbelief. They had never seen or heard of a high-level Saint Master being able to fight with 3 great Saint Masters for so long without even batting an eyelid. Most importantly, this high-level Saint Master was actually fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters head-on. After fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Jianqin had a better understanding of his own strength. Not wanting to continue fighting with the 3 great Saint Masters, he shifted his body slightly to the side, dodging the incoming saint weapons. His feet lightly tapped on the ground, and his body shot forward in a short instant. Following which, the light-wind sword transformed into a silver-white light, as if it had broken through the limits of space, piercing towards one of the great Saint Masters with an inconceivable speed. The speed of this sword was so fast that the three great Saint Masters' faces suddenly changed. After fighting with the three great Saint Masters for so long, this sword was the fastest that Genshin had ever used. In a short moment, the sharp tip of the light wind sword was already close to the throat of the great Saint Master. The expression of the great Saint Master who was being attacked by the light wind sword greatly changed. At such a close distance, the chances of him being able to dodge this sword was very low. In this moment of life and death, the great Saint Master didn't panic. With a shout, a large amount of Saint Chi burst out from his body, wrapping around his entire body. The Saint Chi then formed a ripple of energy that quickly spread out in an attempt to block the light wind sword. As long as he could buy even a small amount of time, he would have a chance to dodge this sword that seemed to represent his death. At the same time, the great Saint Master's upper body twisted to the side as fast as he could. A great Saint Master's full strength was not to be underestimated. When the ripple of energy came into contact with the light wind sword's sharp tip easily broke through and continued to stab towards the great Saint Master's throat. However, because of the ripple of energy, the light wind sword's speed was slightly slower than before. In the end, the light wind sword brushed past the great Saint Master's throat. Even so, the sharp sword chi that was contained within the great Saint Master's sword had left a faint trace of blood on the great Saint Master's neck. Elder Ling, quickly dodge! At this time, the voices of the two great Saint Masters came from the side. Both of them angrily roared as they brandished their saint weapons and attacked Genshin with all their might. They wanted to buy time for the great Saint Master who had just dodged Genshin's sword to recover. Genshin coldly snorted. After verifying his strength, he didn't have the energy to continue playing around with these people. Since he had decided to end this battle quickly, he would use all of his strength. With a slight twist of his body, Genshin dodged the two saint weapons by a hair's breadth. Then he once again stabbed out with the light wind sword. This time, the speed of the sword was not inferior to the speed of the previous one. After the great Saint Master had dodged Genshin's sword, he didn't even have the time to stabilize himself before the light wind sword stabbed towards him like a viper. Pooh! With a flash of silver light, the sharp tip of the light wind sword easily pierced through the great Saint Master's throat. The tip of the light wind sword was stained with blood as it pierced through the back of the great Saint Master's neck. Dark red blood dripped down from the light wind sword's body to the ground. The second sword pierced through the old man's throat before he could even react. The two swords were too fast, and the pause in between was very short. It was so short that after the old man dodged the first sword, he did not have time to stabilize his body before the second sword arrived at him at lightning speed. Elder Ling Buodong, seeing the great Saint Master who had his throat pierced, the other two great Saint Masters of the great Saint Master clan cried out in alarm. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. None of them would have thought that Genshin, who was only a high-level Saint Master, would not only be able to easily deal with three great Saint Masters, but also kill one of them. Wu Yin, I will kill you. Wu Yin, don't even think about leaving this place today. The two great Saint Masters glared at Genshin with eyes filled with hatred and anger. Their eyes were so red that it seemed as if they wanted to cut Genshin into 1,000 pieces. Immediately after, they brandished the saint weapons in their hands and rushed towards Genshin. The surrounding people who were watching the show also had expressions of shock and disbelief. Genshin, who was only a high-level Saint Master, was able to fight against three great Saint Masters and not be at a disadvantage. This was already enough to make them feel shocked, but now he had even killed a great Saint Master. If this scene did not happen in front of their eyes, even if they were beaten They would not believe it. Even so, they felt as if they had entered into a dream. It was so unreal. Battle skill. This is the effect of a battle skill. This battle skill can actually allow a high-level Saint Master to kill a great Saint Master. This is definitely a powerful battle skill. No matter what price I have to pay, I have to get my hands on this combat skill. Within the crowd, a low voice once again sounded out. At this moment, everyone attributed Genshin's killing of a great Saint Master to the battle skill. Immediately after, many people's eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement. Some of them even began to tremble slightly, as if this battle skill was their own. In their minds, they were all imagining how strong they would be if they could learn this battle skill. Following the sound of the sword whistling through the air, the light wind sword had already filled the sky with sword shadows, enveloping the remaining 2 great Saint Masters of the Yulan family. Ding, 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 ding. A series of dense sounds of weapons colliding rang out as the light wind sword and the 2 saint weapons clashed at an extremely fast speed. However, Genshin's sword was now much faster than before, and every strike was filled with killing intent. Therefore, after blocking 5 or 6 strikes each, the 2 great Saint Masters were forced into a panic. Chapter 185. Genshin's sword became faster and faster, and the 2 great Saint Masters of the Yulan clan immediately felt the pressure increase. They had never thought that they, 2 great Saint Masters, would be forced into such a miserable state by someone who was only a high-level Saint Master. So, the silver light from the light wind sword brushed past one of the large swords and pierced through the throat of one of the middle-aged men in front of him, leaving a gaping hole in his throat. In just a few breaths of time, another great Saint Master died under Genshin's sword. The last remaining old man turned pale with fright. The 2 of them were only barely able to fight evenly against Genshin when they joined forces, and they were already at a disadvantage. Now that one of their companions had died, and with the strength that Genshin had displayed, the old man was definitely not a match for Genshin. If he really fought against Genshin alone, he would probably die even faster. Thinking up to here, the old man from the Yulan family suddenly became incomparably ugly. However, he wasn't stupid and didn't give Genshin any time to attack him. He immediately shouted, "Everyone, not only does Wu Yin have a rank 5 monster core, he also has at least 1 high-level battle skill. With just any one of us, we won't be able to kill him. Instead, we'll be killed instead. If we want to obtain the battle skill and the rank 5 monster core, we'd better join forces and capture him together." Although the old man from the Yulan family was trying to save himself, his words weren't without reason. After all, Genshin had fought against 3 great Saint Masters alone and killed 2 of them in a short period of time. This scene was witnessed by everyone present. "Go, let's attack together. We must obtain the battle skill. Wu Yun's battle strength is too strong. 2 or 3 great Saint Masters won't have much of a chance of winning against him. While we have the advantage in numbers, we should kill Wu Yun first. Wu Yun is more of a threat to us than any of the large families." The words of the old man from the Yulan family quickly gained the approval of everyone present. Soon after, 7 or 8 great Saint Masters took out their saint weapons and charged towards Genshin. Genshin's face slightly changed. Although facing 3 great Saint Masters wasn't too difficult for him, there were more than 10 powers present. If they all joined forces to attack him, then he wouldn't be able to stop them. Right now, the situation didn't give Genshin too much time to think. At this time, the 7 or 8 great Saint Masters had already closed in on Genshin's body. With loud shouts, their saint weapons filled with powerful Saint Chi chopped towards Genshin. Although these people hadn't worked together for many years, they still had a certain amount of battle experience. The direction in which the saint weapons were chopping towards Genshin had sealed off all of the space in which he could dodge. Genshin's face became serious. Facing 8 great Saint Masters at the same time, he felt an enormous pressure. With a wave of his right hand, The light wind sword's shadow filled the surrounding space. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, the light wind sword had clashed with the saint weapons more than 10 times in a short period of time. As for the saint weapons that were about to attack, they were all blocked by the light wind sword, causing their attacks to deviate. Genshin's body slightly swayed, and in an instant he appeared in front of one of the great saint masters. His light wind sword was like lightning as it pierced towards the throat of one of the great saint masters. The middle-aged man had just struck out with his sword and had yet to retrieve his saint weapon. Coupled with the fact that the old energy in his body had just been depleted and the new energy was being replenished, the middle-aged man simply had no time to dodge this lightning-fast attack. Pooh! The light wind sword directly pierced through the great saint master's throat. Feeling the intense pain in his throat and the feeling of being unable to breathe, the great saint master's heart was filled with disbelief. Waves of dizziness began to spread throughout his entire head. Am I dead? Am I dead? Is my life really going to end like this? I actually died at the hands of a saint master. In the final moments of his life, the great saint master still couldn't believe that a saint master like him would actually be killed by a saint master. As the light wind sword was pulled out of the great saint master's throat, the great saint master's body finally fell to the ground. Even as his life was about to end, his eyes were still wide open. Luda, a skinny man wearing a green robe who was standing on top of the roof, saw the great saint master lying on the ground. His face immediately changed, and with a cry of alarm, he jumped down from the roof and arrived in front of the great saint master in the blink of an eye. Luda, Luda! The green-robed man squatted down beside the great saint master, his voice filled with anxiety. However, the great saint master was already dead. No matter how he called out, there was no response. Not far away, there were 2 middle-aged men and 6 black-robed old men standing on top of a building, watching the battle from afar. Mayor, don't tell me that we don't have to go and stop them? After all, this Phoenix City is our territory. One of the old men indifferently said. Hearing this, a middle-aged man wearing a white robe lightly shook his head. His face was filled with helplessness as he said, "It won't be easy to stop them. Although this is Phoenix City, which is my territory, the people gathered here are not only the top powers of the surrounding cities, but also the 3 great clans of Phoenix City. If we act rashly, I'm afraid that we will offend quite a few people. However, this person called Wu Yun is quite strong. With the strength of a high-level Saint Master, he was actually able to kill a great Saint Master. In the Tianyuan continent, this is quite rare." The middle-aged man, standing beside the mayor's side. The mayor slightly nodded and said, "Correct. I don't know where this Wu Yun came from, but his strength is actually so great, especially his sword. It's so fast that even great Saint Masters have to be careful. However, there are several dozen great Saint Masters and several hundred Saint Masters there. Although Wu Yun's battle strength is not weak, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult for him to escape today. If he also has the strength of a great Saint Master, he should be able to escape from the encirclement of so many people." The one who spoke was an old man with a gloomy voice. Not far away, 2 people dressed in gray robes were standing straight on a roof as they stared at the battle in the distance. One of them was a middle-aged man, while the other was an old man. The old man was the one who had spent 100,000 purple crystal coins to purchase the corpse of the Class 5 magical beast, the Quick Cloud Beast. "Young master, do you think we should go and help him? After all, the magical beast was provided by him. Speaking of which, it can be said that he has helped us," the gray-robed old man softly said as he stared at the battle in the distance. The middle-aged man beside him shook his head and said, "I don't think there's a need. This Wu Yun is not simple. He's so young, yet he already possesses the strength of a high-level Saint Master. His battle strength is so great that even regular great Saint Masters are not his opponent. This kind of potential is rare even in the entire Tianyuan continent. Moreover, his movement technique is not bad. If he wants to escape, there's still a chance for him to succeed. Moreover, this can be considered a test for him. After all, if he only cultivates quickly, his final accomplishments won't be too great. Only those who have gone through trials of blood and fire, those who have walked on the edge of life and death countless times, can be called geniuses. Otherwise, it would only be a disgrace to the word geniuses. The old man nodded in agreement and said, "Young master's sunlight is vicious. This old man cannot compare to you." The middle-aged man smiled and said with a gentle voice, "Old Jin, let's go. Since we've already found the corpse of the magical beast, our mission can be considered complete. It's time for us to return." With that, the two of them leaped off the roof and disappeared with a few flashes. On the other side, Jianqin had already begun fighting with several great Saint Masters again. Facing the encirclement of 7 or 8 great Saint Masters at the same time, Jianqin was no longer able to fight as easily as he did against 3 great Saint Masters. After holding on for a while, a few more wounds appeared on his body. A few of the great Saint Masters had faint streaks of blood on their throats. If it were not for the fact that they had dodged in time at the most crucial moment and that someone had saved them, they probably would have become lifeless corpses long ago. The light in Jianqin's eyes flickered as he quickly glanced around. He knew that the sword technique he had used had been treated as a high-level battle skill. With how precious battle skills were on the Tianyuan continent, they definitely would not let him go so easily. Although he had killed several great Saint Masters, there were still over a dozen powerful organizations present. There were even several dozen great Saint Masters among them. If they worked together, it would be impossible for him to deal with them with his current strength. Chapter 186. He's trying to escape. Chase him, don't let him escape. The battle technique is on him, we can't let him escape. Quickly chase him. As soon as Jianqin started to run, the surrounding people began to shout. A high-level battle technique was something that even Earth Saint Masters would drool over. Many Earth Saint Masters had yet to learn a battle technique, let alone a group of great Saint Masters. Wu Yin, stay. Where do you think you're going? Hand over the battle technique, and we'll spare your life. Following the fiery shouts, the great Saint Masters on the roof and the ground all began to attack Jianqin. If Jianqin had continued to fight, perhaps he wouldn't have attracted the attention of so many people. But now that he was running away, no one would allow him to do so. In total, there were at least 30 Saint Masters attacking Jianqin. The Saint force contained within the Saint weapons filled the small space, making it seem extremely terrifying. Above Jianqin's head, a huge axe, 2 huge swords, a machete, and a scimitar slashed down with a crushing force. Now that Jianqin was in the air, he had no way of changing his direction. Helpless, the light wind sword in his hand turned into a blur as it pierced out like lightning, creating a dense net of swords in front of him. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sounds of weapons colliding, Jianqin's light wind sword clashed with the Saint weapons above his head. Although he managed to block the attacks, the Saint weapons were still powerful enough to force Jianqin's body back down to the ground. As soon as his feet touched the ground, Jianqin didn't hesitate and used all of his strength to push off the ground. Like a cannonball, he quickly shot forward. In front of Jianqin, 2 Saint Masters, wielding Saint weapons, walked out from the crowd. Seeing Jianqin rushing towards them, a sharp light flashed in their eyes. Following that, a powerful Saint force surged out from their Saint weapons and slashed towards Jianqin. The temptation of a battle technique was just too great, and Jianqin's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. 1 or 2 Saint Masters wouldn't even be able to protect themselves against Jianqin. Thus, at this moment, the leaders of the various powers seemed to have a tacit understanding. Although they didn't communicate with each other, they all worked together to deal with Jianqin. Jianqin charged forward at an extremely fast speed. Just as the 2 Saint weapons were about to land on him, he changed his footsteps. His body moved at high speed, and in an unbelievable instant he moved 2 feet to the side, just dodging the attacks of the 2 saint weapons. Ing! The light wind sword quickly pierced through the air, creating a sound similar to that of a sword breaking through the air. Then, as if it was carrying a thunderous force, it broke through all obstructions and pierced through the throat of one of the saint masters. Pooh! Genshin's eyes flashed with a cold killing intent. His eyes were filled with killing intent, as if they could annihilate his opponent's soul. Some of the weaker ones didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Just as the light wind sword pierced through the saint master's throat, Genshin immediately pulled it out and stabbed it towards another saint master. Seeing that his comrade had been killed by a single photo, the remaining saint master couldn't help but turn pale with fright. Although he knew that Genshin was strong, he didn't think that he would be strong to this extent. With just a single photo, he was able to kill a saint master. Seeing that the silver-white sword in Genshin's hand that seemed to represent the Grim Reaper's scythe was already stabbing towards him, the great saint master's face suddenly changed. He used all of his strength to pull back his weapon and immediately used it to block his throat. Ding! Even though this saint master had managed to block the fatal blow, the power of the light wind sword still caused him to uncontrollably take 2 steps back. However, before he could even stabilize himself, the sharp sound of the air being pierced rang out again. All he could see was a silver ray of light piercing through his throat. When the light dissipated, it was discovered that it was actually a long, thin sword. The body of the sword was already stained with blood. The saint master who had his throat pierced by the light wind sword widened his eyes. In the last moment of his life, there was only one thought in his mind. What a fast sword! At this time, the remaining 30 or so saint masters also rushed towards Genshin from all directions. They quickly closed in on Genshin, and a few of them who were already close to Genshin had their saint weapons chopped towards Genshin. Genshin quickly scanned his surroundings and quickly blocked a few of the saint weapons that he couldn't dodge. Then, with a flash of his body, he charged into the group of saint masters. Right now, if he wanted to break out of the encirclement of 30 or so saint masters, he could only break out from the ground. This was because on the ground there were hundreds of people covering him. If he was to blend into the crowd, it would be much harder for the saint masters to block him. If he were to escape through the air, he would most likely be surrounded by dozens of saint masters. With a flash, Genshin charged into the group of saint masters. His light wind sword turned into a streak of white light that danced in all directions, continuously slicing through the throats of his enemies. Against these saint masters, Genshin was using his full strength, and there was almost no one who could escape from his sword. Genshin quickly charged through the group of saint masters. Wherever he went, the people who belonged to the various large powers would fall to the ground. Quickly run! The group of people turned pale with fright. Like ants on a hot pan, they all fled in all directions. Bastard! Wu Yin, I will not forgive you. I will cut you into 10,000 pieces. Seeing the people who had died under Genshin's sword, a few saint masters were flustered and exasperated. They flew into the crowd and chased after Genshin. However, there were many people who belonged to their own powers. In such a dense crowd, the saint masters felt that their hands and feet were tied. It was impossible for them to be like Genshin and kill without any fear. Everyone scatter! Someone immediately shouted. However, his words were unnecessary. When Genshin charged into the group of saint masters, they all began to run for their lives. However, with hundreds of people squeezed into the narrow street, it was impossible to escape in a short amount of time. Moreover, Genshin's sword was incomparably fast, so only those who were far away from Genshin were able to escape. As for those who were in front of him, they were all killed by Genshin without exception. In just a few breaths of time, Genshin had killed his way out of the encirclement of hundreds of people. Afterwards, he did not stop and immediately fled into the distance. Chapter 187. Seeing Genshin's group gradually disappear from his sight, the city lord, who was standing on a roof in the distance, immediately let out a sigh of relief. He said, "They're finally gone. If we let them continue like this, who knows what would happen to my Phoenix City?" The words of the city lord caused the few people behind him to secretly nod their heads. Although Fengyang City was their territory, and as a second-tier city, the number of troops they could control was in the hundreds of thousands. However, there was not just one faction gathered there. There were a total of over 10 factions from several nearby cities, as well as Fengyang City itself. Every one of them was not to be trifled with. If they were to join forces, even the city lord of Fengyang City, who controlled hundreds of thousands of troops, would feel an extreme headache. I never thought that Wu Yun would actually possess a battle skill. I'm just too surprised. On the Tianyuan continent, even some Earth Saint Masters don't possess any battle skills. An old man behind the city lord sighed emotionally. His face was filled with envy. This Wu Yun's luck is really good. Not only did he pick up 2 Class 5 magical beast corpses for free, he even possesses a battle skill. I wonder where he got it from. This Wu Yun is not simple. I hope he doesn't have too great of a background. Otherwise, the clans that are hunting him down will be in for a bad time. Sigh, a man's wealth is his own ruin. Standing in the Phoenix City, the city lord sighed and immediately ordered, "Immediately notify the guards at the city gates. Let them leave the city without any obstructions." Yes. Chen quickly fled towards the city gates on the main street. Although Fengyang City was very large and there were many places where he could hide, there were still many spies within the city. Continuing to stay in Fengyang City was an extremely unwise choice. Right now, the best choice was to leave Fengyang City. In the open wilderness outside the city, his chances of escaping would be much higher. Jianchen was bleeding profusely from several wounds on his body. His clothes were completely dyed red. Now he had no time to treat the wounds on his body. Escaping from here and keeping himself safe was the most important thing now. At times, Jianchen would run wildly on the streets, and at other times he would use his qinggong to constantly jump on the buildings on both sides of the street. His speed had already surpassed the running speed of some low-level magical beasts. On the streets, the horses and magical beasts that were carrying their masters were constantly overtaken by Jianchen. Although Jianchen's speed was very fast, the group of great saint masters behind him were not much slower than Jianchen. Although they did not have a profound movement technique like Jianchen's, their saint force was definitely stronger than Jianchen's, making up for the shortcoming. "Wu Yin, you can't escape if you don't want to die. Then stop obediently." Within the group of great saint masters who were chasing after them, there were people who continuously shouted out. The volume of their voices was so loud that it was deafening, spreading far into the distance. Even the people on the nearby streets could hear them clearly. The 30 great saint masters chased Jianchen through several streets. On the way, their loud voices naturally attracted the curiosity of the people on the streets. They all stopped and began to discuss with each other. Among the 30 great saint masters chasing behind him, a middle-aged man stared at the fleeing Jianchen and muttered in a low voice, "This Wu Yan's speed is really fast. Looking at the current situation, it's impossible to catch up to him in a short amount of time." Following that, the middle-aged man turned to the person beside him and said, "Third brother, among us, I'm afraid that only you can catch up to Wu Yun, and we definitely can't let Wu Yun escape. Why don't you go and stop him?" The person called third brother wore red clothes. He had a medium build, neither fat nor thin. Although he was already middle-aged, one could still tell from his appearance that when he was young, this person called third brother was definitely a handsome and confident person. Hearing that, the third brother stared at the fleeing Jianchen, and the scene of Jianchen killing several great saint masters immediately appeared in his mind. A trace of hesitation appeared in his eyes. Second brother, Although this Wu Yun only has the strength of a high-level Saint Master, he has a battle skill. Didn't you see that a few great Saint Masters were killed in a single exchange? I'm afraid that I'm not his opponent by myself. When he thought of the scene of Jianqin killing great Saint Masters in a single exchange, the third brother's heart began to palpitate. Third brother, although you only have the strength of a low-level great Saint Master, don't forget that you have wind attributed Saint Force. You have a great advantage in terms of speed, and Wu Yan's greatest advantage is his speed. He's so fast that we have to be careful, and you just happen to be his nemesis. The middle-aged man said, Second brother, although I have wind attributed Saint Force, my contract with wind is extremely low. I've seen Jianqin's sword speed, and it's definitely faster than mine. I really don't have the confidence to face him. The third brother's face was filled with difficulty. The middle-aged man sighed. The fact that the third brother was so afraid of death made him feel a trace of displeasure. Third brother, don't you see that we have so many people chasing after him? You only need to stop him for a short period of time. Once Wu Yun is surrounded by us again, it'll be very difficult for him to escape. At that time, I'll immediately take off Wu Yun's spatial belt and give it to you. Take it and run immediately. With your speed, if you burst out with your full strength, there aren't many people here who can catch up to you. Hearing those words, the third brother hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing. All right, second brother, I'll go stop Wu Yun right now. You guys have to catch up as soon as possible. Don't worry, third brother. Whether or not we'll be able to snatch the battle skill from the hands of so many people will all depend on you. The middle-aged man patted third brother's shoulder and whispered into his ear. There was a hint of excitement in his tone. According to his thoughts, if this plan succeeded, there was an 80 to 90% chance that the combat skills and the 2-class 5 monster cores would fall into their hands. Jianqin had already been running for an incense stick's worth of time. Under his full strength, his speed was much faster than riding a horse. In a short period of time, he had already covered 40 kilometers. At this moment, he was already getting closer and closer to the gates of Phoenix City. Right at this moment, among the 30 great Saint Masters chasing after him, a green light suddenly flashed. A figure wrapped in a faint green light suddenly shot out, and his speed suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, he surpassed the surrounding great Saint Masters and quickly rushed towards Jianqin. Chapter 188. Wind attributed Saint Force cultivators had an absolute advantage in terms of speed. If a great Saint Master had wind attributed Saint Force, then even an Earth Saint Master would have a hard time surpassing him in speed. Although Jian Chen's movement technique was also extraordinary, with his current strength as a high-level Saint Master, his speed was at most comparable to a high-level Great Saint Master. If he faced a Great Saint Master with Wind Attribute Saint Force, there was no way he could escape. The Great Saint Master with Wind Attributed Saint Force was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had caught up to Jianqin. His large sword flickered with a faint green light as if it was enveloped by a layer of wind. It turned into a green light as it slashed towards Jianqin's back. Jianqin's eyes flashed. He was currently about 500 meters away from the group of Great Saint Masters. Before they caught up, he had to quickly take care of this Great Saint Master with Wind Attributed Saint Force. Otherwise, if he were to be surrounded by dozens of Great Saint Masters again, then it would not be easy to escape. The silver light wind sword appeared in Jianqin's hands in an instant. Carrying an extremely sharp sword chi, it pierced backwards like lightning. Ding! The large sword and the light wind sword collided with each other. This time, it was clear that both of them had used their full strength. The powerful Saint Force contained within the Saint weapons collided with each other, creating a visible ripple of energy that quickly spread out in all directions. All the buildings that were affected by the ripple of energy suffered varying degrees of damage. There were even a few unlucky mercenaries that were selling low-level monster cores that were sent flying backwards by the ripple of energy. Mother, there are actually people fighting here. That faint green light, it's actually wind attributed Saint Force. Hurry up and get away. These two people are both experts. If we get caught up in the ripple of energy, then the unlucky ones will be us. The city guards are about to arrive. The fight between the two caused the originally quiet street to become chaotic in an instant. Some of the weaker pedestrians hurriedly distanced themselves from the two to avoid being affected. The light wind sword in Genshin's hand continued to stab out, each strike faster than the previous one. At this time, he had to kill this Wind Saint Force user as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, a Great Saint Master with a Wind attribute wasn't as easy to kill as a normal Great Saint Master. Under Genshin's concentrated attacks, this Great Saint Master with the Wind attribute found it difficult to deal with, but at least he wasn't forced to the point of being flustered. Even though Genshin's sword was absolutely faster than his dodging speed and attack speed, this Great Saint Master only had the idea of stalling Genshin. Under his blindly defending situation, it was really difficult for Genshin to kill him in a short period of time. After stalling for a while, the group of Great Saint Masters behind him had already caught up. Seeing the group of Great Saint Masters quickly closing in on him, Genshin gritted his teeth and gave up on his opponent. He stomped on the ground and continued to run towards the city gates. As soon as Genshin started to run, the Great Saint Master with the Wind attribute immediately chased after him, not giving Genshin a chance to escape. Under this kind of entanglement, Genshin was quickly surrounded by a group of Great Saint Masters. Wu Yin, let's see where you'll run to this time. Although the group of Great Saint Masters didn't belong to the same faction, at this moment, all of them were working together to deal with Genshin. Not only were there people on the ground, there were also people standing on top of the surrounding buildings to prevent Genshin from escaping through the air. Seeing the group of Great Saint Masters surrounding him again, Genshin's expression became very serious. After blocking the attacks of several people, he leapt into the air, leaving behind afterimages as he entered a restaurant on the side of the street. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Following the flickering of several silhouettes, several Great Saint Masters immediately followed closely behind and entered the restaurant. Meanwhile, the rest of the people also surrounded the entire restaurant. Inside the restaurant, when several sacred masters had just entered, they suddenly saw a flash of white light. A thin and narrow longsword already shot over from the side with extreme speed, stabbing towards one of them like lightning. Careful! Although they were immediately noticed, the speed of the sword was extremely fast. Adding on the fact that they didn't expect Genshin to be surrounded by so many people, it was already too late for them to react. Pooh! The light wind sword pierced through one of the people's throat. Another Great Saint Master was killed by Genshin. After that, Genshin immediately pulled out the light wind sword and began to fight with the rest of the people. Pung! 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 The tables and chairs in the restaurant were quite damaged because of the fight between the two sides. Fortunately, it wasn't the peak time for eating yet, so the restaurant was quite empty. Aside from a few waiters, there weren't many people eating. As for the few people who were eating in the restaurant, when they saw Genshin and the others fighting, they immediately hid far away. Genshin was fiercely fighting with the Great Saint Masters at the entrance of the restaurant. The space here was very small, so Genshin didn't have to face enemies from all sides like outside. Thus, fighting in here made the pressure on Genshin a bit less. Sirs, I beg of you to go outside and fight. My small restaurant can't withstand your torment. The well-dressed shopkeeper had a long face as he begged the people around him. As for the other waiter, they had already run to the foot of the restaurant and were squatting there, not daring to say a word. Boom, boom! At this time, two loud sounds rang out. An entire wall of the restaurant suddenly collapsed. A few more Great Saint Masters rushed in from outside and attacked Jianchen. Jianchen's expression slightly changed. At this time, there were already 10 great Saint Masters in the restaurant. Facing 10 great Saint Masters at the same time was very taxing for him. Jianchen didn't want to continue fighting. His feet stomped on the ground, and his entire body shot up. He directly smashed through the wooden floor of the restaurant, creating a large hole in it, and went up to the second floor. Chase! The 10 great Saint Masters also smashed through the wooden floor of the restaurant and rushed up to the second floor. However, when one of them had just reached the second floor and didn't even have time to look around, the sound of something breaking through the air came from behind him. In an instant, he was stabbed in the neck from behind. Immediately after, the silver-white sword flashed again and stabbed into the throat of another person not far away. In just a short moment, Jianchen used this perfect opportunity to kill the two of them with lightning-like speed. At this time, the rest of the people also reacted. When they saw what happened to the two people, they all broke out in a cold sweat. However, they secretly rejoiced in their hearts. Fortunately, Jianchen's target wasn't them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to survive in this kind of situation. Right now, there's only about half of the saint force in my body left. If I use my full strength like this, I won't be able to last much longer. Right now, I need to preserve my strength and escape. I can't continue to be entangled with them. If I even use up the strength to escape, then it seems like I'm going to die here today. Jianchen quickly made a plan in his mind. Right now, everyone was already on guard. He had already lost the good opportunity to make a move as easily as before. And if this kind of method was used a second time, it wouldn't work at all. How could a person who had suffered a loss a second time suffer a loss? Chapter 189. Just as Jianchen reached the mouth of the well, a white object suddenly shot out from the window of the second floor of the restaurant, directly towards Jianchen. Jianchen stabbed the white object with his sword. Immediately, a large amount of white powder erupted from the white object, instantly enveloping Jianchen. However, Jianchen wasn't worried at all. He allowed the white powder to touch his body. His body was immune to poison. Although it hadn't reached perfection, he was immune to most poisons in the world. Jianchen directly punched the stone slab covering the mouth of the well. With a boom, the Ponthic stone slab was directly smashed into pieces by Jianchen, revealing the dark mouth of the well. Then, without any hesitation, Jianchen immediately jumped in. In the back courtyard of the restaurant, people continuously flew in from all directions. In the end, they all gathered at the mouth of the well. There were a total of 28 people. Of the 30 or so great Saint Masters that had surrounded Jianchen, there were only 28 people left. Staring at the dark mouth of the well, a black-robed old man said in a deep voice, "What a cunning fellow! He actually jumped into the well. What should we do now?" Staring at the dark mouth of the well, a black-robed old man said with an extremely ugly expression, "All the wells in Phoenix Sun City are connected. There are tens of thousands of wells in Phoenix Sun City that are connected to a huge reservoir below. He can definitely escape to any place in Phoenix Sun City through this well." A bare-chested, dark-skinned man said in a deep voice. He belonged to the Hyman clan, a local power of Phoenix Sun City. Thus, he was much more clear about the situation than the other powers. "Then what should we do now? Should we chase down this well?" An old man muttered to himself. He couldn't make up his mind. "I don't think so. Although Wu Yin only has the strength of a great Saint Master, I believe that everyone has seen his battle strength with their own eyes. On the ground, even if 2 or 3 of us work together, we still wouldn't be his opponent. If we enter the water, not only will our movements be greatly hindered, our vision will also be greatly affected. If we chase down this well, I'm afraid that not only will we not be able to catch him, we will also lose a lot of people." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man. He wore a luxurious white robe with golden edges. His entire body emitted a noble aura. An old man with an aquiline nose sighed heavily and said with a bit of unwillingness, "Don't tell me that we are going to let him escape just like that? The battle skill he has is definitely an extremely profound one. It can actually allow a great Saint Master's speed to reach such a high level. Even with so many of us working together, we still can't catch him." "That's right. It's rare to meet such a weak person with a battle skill. For us, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We definitely can't let it go so easily. At most, after we obtain the battle skill, we can all comprehend the mysteries within it. This way, it will be beneficial for all of us. Finally, those 2 fifth-step monster cores. Although they are also very precious, compared to the battle skill, they are far too lacking. Those profound battle skills are not something that can be bought with money alone." A middle-aged man wearing a white robe said. This person was a member of the Muda family. "That's right. We can't easily give up on this battle skill. However, Wu Yun has already jumped into the well. Through this well, he can reach any place in Phoenix Sun City. Phoenix Sun City is so big, it's not that easy for us to find a single person in the boundless sea of people. I think we should take advantage of the fact that he hasn't escaped far and quickly chase after him. The situation at the bottom of the well is unclear. Furthermore, it's dark. Who knows where Wu Yun is hiding right now, waiting for us to take the bait. This is too dangerous." A group of people started to discuss spiritedly regarding this battle skill. Everyone's hearts were filled with jealousy. They were determined to obtain it, but everyone was greedy for life and afraid of death. They were all worried that they would encounter something bad in the well. After all, none of them were fools. They all knew one thing. Although a battle skill was precious, if they were to lose their lives, then no matter how profound the battle skill was, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, an old man wearing a linen robe revealed a smile on his face. He slowly raised his left hand, and a small snake with the thickness of a finger came out from his sleeve. The old man stretched out his hand and gently stroked the small snake's head. He slowly said, "Everyone, don't worry, Wu Yun won't be able to escape." His tone was filled with confidence. The entire underground of Phoenix Sun City was a natural reservoir. It was connected to all the wells in Phoenix Sun City, providing the entire city with water. At this moment, in the underground reservoir, a figure was nimbly shuttling back and forth like a fish. It was Jianchen who had jumped into the well in the backyard of the restaurant. Because he was underground, the surrounding space was completely dark, adding the water blocking his vision. He couldn't even see his 5 fingers if he stretched out his hand. Jianchen followed the map in his mind and quickly swam in a certain direction. Although it was so dark that he couldn't even see his 5 fingers, Jianchen relied on his powerful spirit to faintly sense a radius of 1 zhang. After staying in Phoenix Sun City for the past few days, Jianchen had also explored the environment of Phoenix Sun City. This kind of escape method was something that Jianchen had planned long ago. Once he fell into a desperate situation where he couldn't escape, he would use the method of jumping into a well to escape. Through this underground reservoir that was connected to all the wells in Phoenix Sun City, he could reach any place in Phoenix Sun City that had a well. With Jianchen's current strength as a high-level Saint Master, holding his breath for a long period of time was as simple as eating a meal for him. Even if he stayed in the water for a few hours without breathing, there wouldn't be any problems. Jianchen swam in the underground reservoir for 6 hours. When he was about 20 kilometers away from his previous location, he swam upwards. After searching for a while, he finally found a 2-meter wide tunnel and rushed out of the water. As soon as his head came out of the water, Jianchen took in large mouthfuls of fresh air. After 6 hours of holding his breath, even Jianchen felt a bit tired. After catching his breath, Jianchen slammed his palms against the water and shot towards the well like a cannonball. Somersaulting in the air, Jianchen landed next to the crystal. He didn't even have time to wipe off the water that was dripping from his hair as he carefully looked around. This was a small courtyard. Not far away, there were a few clothes that had been washed and dried. The surrounding area was empty, and there wasn't a single person in sight. Good thing there's no one here. From the looks of it, this should be the backyard of a small family. Jianqin combed his wet hair and used the light wind sword to remove all of it, leaving only a few inches of hair. I wonder what the situation outside is like. I'm afraid that the local powers have already sent a large number of people to look for me. This place isn't too far from the restaurant, so I should leave this place immediately. Jianqin immediately began to dress up. His previous appearance had already been washed clean by the water in the underground reservoir, so at this moment he had returned to his original appearance. His head of wet hair, coupled with his handsome face, gave him a unique charm. Jianqin didn't hesitate and circulated his Saint Qi to dry the water on his body. He immediately took out a set of clothes from his spatial belt and changed into them. As for the wounds on his body, he didn't have the time to treat them, so he wrapped them up with a few strips of cloth. After all, this was someone else's backyard. Who knew when the owner would return? If the owner found out that there was a stranger in their backyard, it would definitely cause some trouble. Thus, it wasn't wise to stay here for long. The sooner he left, the better. Only after completing all his preparations and confirming that he had not missed anything did Jianqin leave the courtyard. After passing through a few small alleys, he finally arrived on a crowded street. After identifying the location, he continued to make his way to the city gates at a steady pace. Chapter 190. I heard that there are people fighting in the city not far from the Heavenly Phoenix auction house. I don't know who is so daring to actually fight in the city. Are they tired of living? Once they are caught by the city guards, the punishment will be extremely severe. Yeah, I also heard that it was a group of people surrounding and attacking a person. Moreover, a life was lost. What do you guys know? I came from that street. Let me tell you, those people who are fighting are all experts. Moreover, they all have great backgrounds. Even the city guards don't dare to provoke them. They fought their way over, and not a single city guard went to stop them. Yeah, I also heard that those people all have the strength of a great Saint Master. That person who is being chased is really powerful. Facing so many great Saint Masters by himself, not only was he able to escape, he even killed quite a few people. Could the person who is being surrounded by a group of great Saint Masters be an Earth Saint Master? He is actually so powerful. Perhaps it was because Jianqin's fight with a group of great Saint Masters was too sensational, causing the news to spread very quickly. Walking on the street, Jianqin could hear the discussions of passers-by everywhere. As Jianqin listened to the discussions of the passers-by, he continued to walk in the direction of the city gate. After walking for less than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, suddenly several powerful auras came from far behind him. Feeling the sudden auras, Jianqin's figure slightly paused. When he turned around to look, he could faintly see quite a few people on the roofs of the houses on both sides of the street. They were quickly leaping in his direction. Moreover, there were quite a few familiar faces among them. They were the great Saint Masters who had chased after him before. Jianqin's face slightly changed. He suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. What's going on? Did they discover me? Or are they just passing by on the way? Looking at their appearance, it clearly doesn't seem like they are in a hurry. Could it be that I've really been discovered? No, that's impossible. My current appearance is no longer Wu Yun's appearance. They can't possibly recognize me. For a moment, Jianqin could not make up his mind. Right now, he and Wu Yun were like two different people. Other than the few wounds on his body that had not been treated in time, no one could tell that he was Wu Yun. And those wounds had been bandaged by him and covered by his clothes. From the outside, no one could tell that he was Wu Yun. And seeing the group of people behind him coming in with such ferocious momentum, Jianqin felt a little apprehensive. Perhaps they didn't come for me. They should have something else on their minds. That's why they're in such a rush. Especially at a time like this, all the more I can't panic. If I were to run now, wouldn't it mean that there's something wrong with me? Jianchen thought inwardly. He forcefully calmed himself down and continued to walk in the direction of the city gate. But right now, his walking speed was a bit faster than before. Previously, he managed to escape from the encirclement with great difficulty. Right now, he didn't want to fall into it again. But at this time, he definitely couldn't panic. On the other hand, Jianchen was also very confident in his appearance. Right now, he was no longer Wu Yin, but Jianchen. Very quickly, the group of great Saint Masters behind him leaped over the roofs of the houses on both sides of Jianchen. Their speed did not decrease in the slightest. Seeing this scene, Jianchen's heart that was in his throat finally calmed down. Fortunately, these people did not see through his identity. However, right when an old man passed by Jianchen, his expression suddenly changed. He suddenly turned his head and stared at Jianchen, who was standing in the middle of the crowd. He loudly shouted, "Found him! He's here! Quickly surround him!" Before his voice even finished, he already jumped off the roof. In the end, he landed 5 meters away from Jianchen. He vigilantly stared at him, carefully taking precautions, even if he was only facing a high-level Saint Master. This old man with the strength of a great Saint Master didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. He had personally witnessed the scene of Jianchen killing several great Saint Masters. When the rest of the great Saint Masters heard this old man's words, they immediately turned around and shot towards the old man's position. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded Jianchen. This sudden change also made Jianchen slightly stunned. His heart immediately sank, but his expression did not change in the slightest. He cupped his hands towards everyone and said with a smile, "Brothers, I wonder what you all are." Jianchen still didn't dare to believe that his identity would be seen through. He was extremely confident in his own appearance. His current appearance and Wu Yan's face that looked like he was in his 40s could be said to have undergone an earth-shattering change. Moreover, even his hair had been intentionally trimmed. There was not the slightest bit of similarity between the two. The 20 or so great Saint Masters that surrounded Jianchen looked at Jianchen's face that clearly didn't seem to be more than 20 years old. Their expressions were all filled with confusion. "Elder Himu, are you looking for the wrong person?" A white-robed middle-aged man said to an old man. "Yeah, Elder Himu, you're looking for the wrong person. How is this Wu Yin?" As soon as the white-robed middle-aged man finished speaking, another large man spoke in a low, muffled voice. His voice was filled with dissatisfaction. The old man that was called Elder Himu carefully sized up Jianchen. His eyes were filled with confusion as he thought to himself, "Could it be that I've really found the wrong person?" Just as this thought appeared in Elder Himu's mind, a small snake that was only as thick as a finger shot out from Elder Himu's sleeve. The snake raised its head high and continuously spat at Jianchen. Seeing the scene, Elder Himu was slightly shocked. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at Jianchen, who didn't seem to be more than 20 years old. He cried out in surprise, "You're Wu Yin!" Hearing Elder Himu's cry of surprise, the other 20 great Saint Masters also revealed a trace of shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at Jianchen. "Elder Himu, are you sure you didn't get the wrong person?" The red-robed old man still didn't dare to confirm. Elder Himu didn't answer the red-robed old man's question. He sneered and said to Jianchen, "Wu Yin, your ability to change your appearance is truly great. You actually made it so that none of us could recognize you. However, no matter how you change, you still won't be able to escape the senses of my spirit snake." Jianchen's expression also became a bit serious. Elder Himu clearly had a secret method to find out his identity. Right now, there was no way for him to avoid it. Hearing Elder Himu's confident words, the 20 great Saint Masters all felt extremely shocked. However, they didn't slow down at all. They all took out their own saint weapons and surrounded Jianchen. However, no one dared to make the first move. Jianchen's gaze swept through the surroundings before landing on Elder Himu in the end. He said, "Just how did you find me?" "Old man," Himu revealed a slightly complacent expression when he heard that. He said, "There's no harm in telling you. When you jumped into the well earlier, I sprinkled a special medicinal powder on you. The spiritual snake in my hand is extremely sensitive to this medicinal powder. As long as you're within 50 kilometers, I'll be able to find you through this spiritual snake." Jianchen came to a realization and continued, "Could it be that I can't wash off the powder even if I enter the water?" Chapter 191. So that's how it is. Jianchen's face became gloomy. According to what Elder Himu had said, if he didn't get rid of the 100-mile shadow powder, then he definitely wouldn't be able to escape from Elder Himu's pursuit. Right now, the only way was to kill the spirit snake in Elder Himu's hand. The safest way was to get rid of Elder Himu. Only then would he have a chance of escaping. Thinking up to this point, Jianchen's eyes flashed with killing intent. Without wasting any more words, the silver-white light wind sword appeared in his hand and shot towards Elder Himu. Elder Himu gave a sinister smile. He was already prepared for Jianchen's sudden attack and immediately retreated. At the same time, a meter-long scepter appeared in his hand and blocked Jianchen's attack. Everyone attacked together. This time, be careful. We definitely can't let him escape. Just as Jianchen made his move, the other 20 great Saint Masters also leapt into the air. In the air, all of them brandished their swords at Jianchen. 20 sword chi broke free from their saint weapons and shot towards Jianchen. The light wind sword suddenly exploded with a strong sword chi. The hazy sword chi was so dense that it completely covered the light wind sword. Soon after, Jianchen waved the light wind sword, creating an impenetrable net of sword chi that blocked the incoming sword chi. Boom! 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 Following a series of explosions, the area where Jianchen was standing was instantly covered by the sword chi. The sword chi's shockwaves shot towards the ground, filling the air with dust. As soon as the 20 or so great Saint Masters landed on the ground, the 8 strongest people immediately brandished the saint weapons in their hands and chopped at the dust cloud with all their strength. As for the others, they carefully guarded the surroundings to prevent Jianchen from escaping again. Right when the 8 sacred masters' sacred weapons were about to hack down on that area filled with smoke and dust, suddenly a silver-white streak of light shot out from the smoke and dust. The speed of this silver-white streak of light was unimaginably fast, as if it was flying alone in the air. Without anyone controlling it, it quickly circled around those 8 people once before disappearing from sight. Only a shallow line of blood was left on the 8 great Saint Masters' necks. Meanwhile, at the same time, the bodies of the 8 great Saint Masters suddenly froze. Soon after, specks of dark red gradually appeared from their necks, moreover quickly expanding. Soon after, from the necks of the 8 great Saint Masters, bright red blood surged out like fountains. In the end, the 8 of them simultaneously collapsed onto the ground. A white figure shot out from the dust that had yet to disperse. Jianchen did not even bother with the great Saint Masters. He shot past them and charged towards Elder Himu. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword chi as it pierced through the air. The sharp tip of the light wind sword made a sound as it pierced through the air, heading straight for Old Man Himu. Towards Jianchen's sneak attack, Elder Himu had always been on guard. At this critical moment, Elder Himu's face didn't reveal the slightest trace of panic. His body once again retreated, and at the same time he did his best to twist his neck to the side. At the same time, he used the cane in his hand to strike the light wind sword. Ding! The cane and the light wind sword collided with each other, creating a muffled sound. The light wind sword had been knocked to the side by the cane, but Jianchen's sword was extremely fast. The light wind sword immediately followed up and swept towards the cane. Pooh! Jianchen's light wind sword swept past Elder Himu's neck. Elder Himu was a great Saint Master, but under Genshin's full-strength attack, he was killed in a few moves. At this time, a large sword came from behind and fiercely chopped down on Genshin's back. Genshin's entire body was chopped down by the large sword, causing him to stagger forward a few steps. On his back, a half-meter-long wound had appeared. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. Bright red blood surged out from the wound and quickly dyed Genshin's clothes red. Seeing that Genshin had been injured, the eyes of the people who were guarding the perimeter lit up. They immediately rushed towards Genshin. The people who were closest to him took a few steps forward and arrived in front of Genshin. 3 saint weapons came slashing towards Genshin from different directions. "Since you want to die, then I'll help you." Genshin's face revealed a trace of malevolence. Now that he had been injured again and again, not only did it affect his battle prowess, but it also affected his battle prowess. Furthermore, after using his full strength for so long, his Saint Chi was almost completely depleted. If he wanted to escape, then he would have to use his final trump card. Suddenly, an even sharper sword Chi surged out from the light wind sword. Immediately after, the light wind sword left Genshin's hand and flew out like a bolt of lightning. It collided with the 3 saint weapons that were about to hit Genshin's body. Ding, ding, ding. Following the sound of metal colliding, the light wind sword's incredible speed gave it a powerful force. When the 3 saint weapons collided with the light wind sword's powerful force caused the 3 saint weapons to retreat a few steps. Their faces turned pale as they looked at their saint weapons in shock. At the place where the light wind sword had collided with their saint weapons, there was already a small crack. Although it was just a small crack, the impact it brought to the 3 of them was incomparably huge. Their own saint weapons had actually been damaged. Furthermore, their saint weapons were connected to their masters. Now that their saint weapons were damaged, the 3 of them also received a certain amount of damage. So, the light wind sword pierced through the air and continued to fly towards the remaining saint weapons. Its speed was inconceivably fast, almost like a real bolt of lightning. Under Genshin's control, the light wind sword blocked the saint weapons of the remaining 20 saint masters and then went straight for their throats. Pooh, pooh, pooh. In just one picture, 7 saint masters had their throats slit by the light wind sword. Seeing this scene, the faces of the remaining saint masters changed greatly. They hurriedly waved their weapons to block the light wind sword's attack. Bastard, what kind of attack is this? How can the sword fly by itself? And its speed is so terrifying. After narrowly blocking one of the light wind sword's attacks, a pale-faced Saint Master couldn't help but curse out loud. Looking at the weapon in his hand, he saw that there was already a small crack in it. When the rest of the Saint Masters saw the light wind sword flying in the air, they were all shocked. To them, this scene was simply inconceivable. Facing Genshin's light wind sword, the remaining Saint Masters were only able to hold on for a few breaths of time before dying. On the ground, there were already 20 Saint Masters who had their throats slit by the light wind sword. At this moment, the remaining great Saint Masters were completely frightened out of their wits. They no longer had any thoughts of fighting and fled as quickly as they could. One of them was even covered in a layer of faint green, wind-attributed Saint Force. In just a few flashes, he had already fled 100 meters away. His speed was extremely fast. So, Chin didn't plan on letting them go. The light wind sword turned into a bolt of lightning as it chased after them. In the blink of an eye, Genshin had caught up with the Wind Saint Force user, who was the fastest to escape. In the end, the light wind sword pierced through his throat. After killing the Saint Masters, the light wind sword circled in the air once before turning back and continuing to shoot towards the remaining Saint Masters. Facing the light wind sword's incomparable speed, none of the remaining Saint Masters were able to escape. In the end, they all died under the light wind sword. Chapter 192. P.S. I don't know what happened yesterday, but there was a power outage for an entire day. I couldn't write at all, so I couldn't update. Sorry. I started writing this chapter in the wee hours of the morning. The corpses of over 20 great Saint Masters were strewn all over the ground. Their blood dyed the entire street red. Around 100 meters away, countless people had gathered to watch the show. Every single one of them had their eyes wide open as they stared dumbfoundedly at the blood-soaked Jianqin and the 20 great Saint Masters lying on the ground. Their faces were filled with disbelief, and their hearts were filled with shock. Among them, there were quite a few people with extraordinary eyesight. With a single glance, they could see that the 20 or so people all had the strength of a great Saint Master. With 20 or so great Saint Masters gathered together, they formed a powerful force that was enough to sweep through the entire second-class city of Fengyang City. But who would have thought that so many great Saint Masters would actually all die in such a short period of time at the hands of a young man who didn't even seem to be in his 20s? If they hadn't seen this scene with their own eyes, they probably wouldn't have believed it no matter what. Even so, the scene in front of them was still hard for them to accept. They felt that it was so unreal, as if it was a dream. It was so fake. Jianqin's gaze slowly swept over the 20 or so great Saint Master corpses on the ground. His breathing was a bit hurried. The continuous battles had caused his saint force to be severely depleted, causing him to feel a bit tired. However, Jianqin also understood that he couldn't stay here for long. The Class 5 Magical Beasts Corps had attracted quite a few people. Right now, Fengyang City was the most chaotic time. Although on the surface, there were more than 10 forces that weren't weak, in the dark, there were probably some mercenary groups and lone wolves that had their eyes on him. After all, he was currently injured, and his battle strength wasn't as good as when he was at his peak. Adding on the temptation of Class 5 Magical Beast Corps and battle skills, it was enough to make some people dizzy. Although Jianqin could easily kill a great Saint Master with the Divine Sword Manipulation Technique, using the Divine Sword Manipulation Technique would greatly deplete his saint force. This wasn't a long-term plan. The only thing he could do right now was to immediately leave Fengyang City. To Jianqin, the current Fengyang City was countless times more dangerous than when he was in the wilderness. At this time, Jianqin's gaze landed on the Saint Master's spatial belts. His eyes couldn't help but light up. With a flick of his light wind sword, he collected all of their spatial belts into his hand. What made Jianqin even happier was the fact that he had actually discovered 3 spatial rings. Spatial rings were extremely valuable. They were far more valuable than a spatial belt. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that a spatial ring was a symbol of status and strength in the Tianyuan continent. It wasn't as common as a spatial belt, where anyone could have one. Although a spatial belt was divided into different grades, it couldn't be compared to a spatial ring. Jianqin put away the 20 spatial belts and 2 spatial rings. In front of so many people, Jianqin didn't have the time to check what was inside and immediately left. Seeing Jianqin walk over, the people who had gathered to watch the show seemed to have woken up from a dream. Their faces were filled with fear as they parted to let Jianqin pass. Jianqin held the light wind sword that was still dripping with blood as he walked out of the crowd. Wherever he went, the people would give way to him. Even though Jianqin had a youthful face, no one dared to look down on him. Arriving before the mount of a Class 1 magical beast, Jianqin stopped. He fished out a few amethyst coins from his space belt and handed them to the owner. He said coldly, "I'll buy your mount." After saying that, Jianqin didn't wait for the magical beast's owner to agree and directly jumped onto the magical beast. Pulling on the reins, he quickly rode the magical beast towards the city gates. The magical beast's owner was only a mercenary with the strength of a Saint Master. After seeing Jianqin kill 20 Saint Masters with his own eyes, he didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction towards Jianqin's rude behavior. Not to mention that Jianqin had already paid him far more than the magical beast's worth. Even if Jianchen forcefully took the magical beast away from him, the magical beast's owner wouldn't dare to complain. Riding on the magical beast, Jianchen rushed towards the city gates. After a stick of incense worth of time, he finally saw the faintly discernible tall city walls in front of him. But fortunately, nothing happened that Jianchen didn't want to see. Although Phoenix Sun City didn't have the top powers in the surrounding cities, there were still quite a few powerful mercenary groups and some lone rangers. Originally, these people also wanted to get involved. After all, the temptation of 2 rank 5 magical beast cores and a high-level battle skill was too great. But when they received the news that 30 Saint Masters had already died in Jianchen's hands, it was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads, causing them to immediately give up on the idea of surrounding Jianchen. In the distance, when the guards on the city walls saw Jianchen riding a Class 1 magical beast and drenched in blood, they immediately shouted something to the people below. The soldiers below the city walls also immediately made way for the people entering and exiting the city, making way for Jianchen. It was obvious that they had already received orders from the city lord of Phoenix Sun City. In the heart of the Phoenix Sun City city lord, he couldn't wait for Jianchen to be sent out of the city as soon as possible. After all, if he continued to stay here, then the powers that would be attracted to him wouldn't be easy to provoke. Even the Phoenix Sun city lord didn't want to offend him. Seeing this scene, Jianchen didn't slow down at all. He still maintained his high speed as he rushed toward the city gates. In the end, under the astonished gazes of a group of people, he rushed out of the city gates with a gust of wind. After leaving the city gates, Jianchen finally let out a sigh of relief. To him, the wilderness was much safer than Phoenix Sun City. After all, here, he wouldn't be harassed by an endless amount of enemies, especially the local powers of Phoenix Sun City, who knew just how strong they were and whether or not there were Earth Saint Masters hidden among them. Moreover, he had killed quite a few of their Saint Masters. Those local powers definitely wouldn't let him go so easily. If he continued to stay in Phoenix Sun City, then he would have to face their endless harassment. Haha, Mr. Wu Yin really is skilled. I didn't think that you would be so strong at such a young age. This should be the effect of that battle skill. Just when Jianchen was about 10 kilometers away from Phoenix Sun City, a somewhat old but full of energy voice suddenly rang out from behind him. Hearing this voice, Jianchen's expression suddenly changed. He immediately turned around and saw that about 5 kilometers away, a figure was chasing after him at an extremely fast speed. That speed was so fast that it was much faster than the magical beast that Jianchen was riding. Chapter 193. Sir, don't tell me you want the 2 Class 5 monster cores on me as well. Jianchen's voice boomed out, echoing through the surroundings and spreading far and wide. Hee, Class 5 monster cores may be precious, but they're nothing to me. Wu Yin, I want your battle skill. Give it to me, and I won't make things difficult for you. The old man's voice rang out from afar, clearly reaching Jianchen's ears. In just a few seconds, the old man had closed the distance between Jianchen and the old man. From the initial 5 kilometers, he was now only 4 kilometers away. Jianchen's face became extremely ugly when he saw the old man's terrifying speed. Without any hesitation, he immediately leapt off the back of the Class 1 magical beast and began to run as fast as he could. Although this would drain his saint force, the speed of a Class 1 magical beast was much slower than his full speed. If he continued to remain on the back of the magical beast, the old man would probably catch up to him very soon. Jianchen ran as fast as he could on the ground. The violent movements of his body tore at the terrifying wound on his back. The heart-wrenching pain caused Jianchen's facial muscles to constantly twitch. His face had already become rather pale as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. If he had been struck in the back by a sword, the pain would not have been so intense. However, the violent movements of his body tore at his back, causing the wound on his back to expand at almost all times. The pain from his muscles slowly tearing apart was basically devastating to his nerves. Jianqin endured the intense pain on his back as he ran as fast as he could. Although he had not clashed with the old man, Jianqin felt an unprecedented threat from him. The old man was definitely terrifyingly powerful. The old man behind him could not help but sneer as he watched Jianqin flee. He said, "Wu Yin, you're just wasting your energy like this. You won't be able to escape from me." With that, the old man's speed suddenly increased by another 30%. The distance between him and Jianqin quickly closed. For kilometers, 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, the old man was extremely fast. In less than 10 minutes, he had closed the distance between him and Jianqin from 5 kilometers to 1 kilometer. Even though Jianqin had already increased his speed to the limit, he was still unable to shake off the old man. Moreover, using his movement technique to escape with all his strength was extremely taxing on Jianqin's Saint Force. In the end, when the old man was less than 500 meters away from him, Jianqin finally stopped. He turned around and stared at the old man while panting slightly. Seeing that Jianqin had stopped running, the old man also slowed down. In the end, he stood still 20 meters away from Jianqin. He had a seemingly amiable smile on his face, but his eyes were filled with curiosity and surprise as he sized up Jianqin. "Wu Yin, that shouldn't be your real name, right? However, that is no longer important to me. However, the fact that you were able to kill over 30 great Saint Masters with the strength of a high-level Saint Master has truly shocked me," the old man said with a smile on his face. His tone was amiable. Hearing the old man's amiable voice, Jianqin frowned slightly. This voice gave him a faint sense of familiarity, as if he had heard it somewhere before. Immediately, Jianqin's mind flashed as he suddenly thought of a person. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Old mister, if my guess is correct, you should belong to the Harito clan of Yellow Earth City, right?" Jianqin had a very deep impression of the Harito clan. During the Heavenly Phoenix auction, the people who had gathered over 10 of the strongest powers from the surrounding cities actually didn't dare to compete with the Harito clan for the corpse of a Class 5 magical beast. Moreover, all of them were willing to give the first Class 5 magical beast corpse to the Harito clan. In the end, the Harito clan only had to spend a small amount of money to obtain the precious Class 5 magical beast corpse. From that moment on, Jianqin had already understood that the Harito clan was probably extremely powerful. At the very least, all the powers that could be called hegemons from different places were extremely fearful of the Harito clan. The old man nodded slightly and said, "Correct, old man is indeed a member of the Harito clan. Wu Yin, I only want your battle skill. As for the 2 Class 5 monster cores, I won't touch you." Seeing the flickering light in Jianqin's eyes, the old man gently snorted and continued, "Wu Yin, you should hand over the battle skill. Old man isn't as easy to deal with as those great Saint Masters. In front of an Earth Saint Master, a high-level Saint Master like you has no chance of escaping." Earth Saint Master. Hearing that, Jianqin sucked in a cold breath. Although he had already guessed that the old man's strength had probably reached the level of an Earth Saint Master, it was still just a guess. Now that the old man had personally confirmed it, he had no choice but to accept this reality. The old man before him was actually an Earth Saint Master. Sucking in a deep breath, Jianqin calmed down very quickly and said, "Senior, if I said that I don't have any battle skills, would you believe me?" Hearing that, the old man's smiling face immediately became stern. A sharp light flashed through his eyes, and he said, "Wu Yin, my patience is limited. I don't have that much time to waste with you. It's best if you hand over the battle skill quickly. Otherwise, I'll have to do it myself." Reaching this point, the old man's voice paused slightly before a sinister smile appeared on his face. He said, "If you really don't have any battle skills, then it doesn't matter. You can stay in my Harlador clan for a while and write down all the battle skills you know, as well as the method of controlling saint weapons to fly freely in the air." Jianqin sighed inside when he heard that. He knew that there was no turning back now. unless he handed over the battle skill. This Earth Saint Master old man would never let him go no matter what. The only thing he could do now was fight to the death. Only then would he have a chance of escaping. Moreover, Genshin also understood that even if this old man wanted to kill him, he wouldn't dare to do so before he obtained the battle skill. What made Genshin feel even more helpless was that he didn't have any battle skills. All he had was the cultivation method of the Azulite sword manual that was mistaken for a battle skill. Since he had made his decision, Genshin didn't hesitate any longer. He stomped his feet on the ground and quickly retreated. Seeing Genshin's actions, the old man revealed a disdainful sneer. His body then shot towards Genshin like a phantom, his two hands reaching for Genshin's neck like lightning. The light wind sword appeared in Genshin's right hand. Facing an Earth Saint Master, Genshin didn't dare to hold back at all. He immediately used his greatest trump card, sword manipulation. Chapter 194. This old man isn't as easy to deal with as those Saint Masters. Seeing the incoming light wind sword, the old man's face showed a trace of disdain. His hand that was about to grab Genshin's neck suddenly changed direction and shot towards the light wind sword with a saint force. Pa! The old man's palm viciously slapped the light wind sword, and the light wind sword was sent flying more than 10 meters to the side. At the same time, the old man's face slightly changed as he looked at his own hand in shock. The hand that had struck the light wind sword was now covered with faint traces of blood. Looking at the wounds on his hand, the old man was slightly dazed. His face was filled with disbelief as he took a deep breath and looked at Genshin with a complicated expression. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, the light wind sword that had just been struck by the old man turned into a bolt of lightning and shot towards the old man. The old man's face slightly changed as his body slightly swayed. In an instant, he moved 3 meters away, and the light wind sword finally pierced through his afterimage. However, the light wind sword's speed was extremely fast. Just as the old man dodged, the light wind sword immediately circled around in the air and once again pierced towards the old man. The old man's eyes turned cold as a surge of saint force appeared in his hand and condensed into a light blue iron hammer. The iron hammer wasn't very big, only about the size of an adult's head. It was covered with a faint blue light and had a strange pattern on its handle. The old man swung the iron hammer towards the light wind sword. Ding! Following the sound of metal colliding, the iron hammer seemed to carry 1,000 kilograms of force as it smashed into the light wind sword, sending it flying far away. At the same time, Genshin let out an almost inaudible grunt. His face, which was already rather pale, became as pale as a sheet of paper, devoid of any blood. Wu Yin, I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to hand over the battle technique or not? Next time I won't be merciful. The old man stared at Genshin with a gloomy expression as he said in a deep voice. In reality, the old man himself was not certain whether the battle skill was with Genshin or not, so he really did not dare to kill Genshin right now. He knew that as long as Genshin was still alive, even if Genshin did not hand over the battle skill, he could still capture him and take him back. There would be plenty of ways to get the information they wanted from Genshin. However, if he killed Genshin, it was very likely that he would not be able to obtain anything. Genshin stared coldly at the old man and gnashed his teeth. Harito clan, I'll remember it. Do you dare to tell me your name? Hearing this, the old man's face showed a trace of disdain. What? You still want revenge? Humph. With your strength that isn't even a great Saint Master, you want to take revenge on my Harito clan? You must be dreaming. Since you want to know my name, then there's no harm in telling you. Remember, this old man's name is Yen Kazaler. Yen Kazaler, I'll remember it. Genshin hatefully said. Just as he finished speaking, the light wind sword flew towards the old man from afar. Seeing that Genshin didn't have any intention of handing over the battle technique, the old man's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. Finally, he lost the last bit of patience in his heart. The hammer in his hand suddenly exploded with a surge of light blue Saint force, bringing with it a sharp whistling sound as it flew towards the light wind sword. Just as the light wind sword and the hammer were about to collide, the light wind sword's trajectory suddenly changed. Like an incomparably nimble poisonous snake, it dodged the hammer and stabbed towards the old man's throat. At the same time, Jianshin's feet fiercely stomped on the ground and his entire body shot out like a cannonball, quickly escaping into the distance. Humph! Insignificant skill. The old man coldly snorted and immediately changed the direction of his attack, smashing towards the light wind sword. His entire body moved horizontally 1/2 meter away, just enough to avoid the light wind sword's attack. In the blink of an eye, Jianshin had already escaped 50 meters away. Under his control, the light wind sword turned into a silver light and flew back into his hand. Seeing Jianshin escape 50 meters away, the old man's eyes finally revealed a trace of killing intent. A trifling Saint Master was as weak as an ant in front of an Earth Saint Master. He didn't even put Jianshin in his eyes. But now, this ant in front of him had actually escaped from his hands. To him, this was an absolute humiliation. "I'll catch you and make you suffer a fate worse than death." The old man's face darkened as he chased after Yan Kai. The speed of an Earth Saint Master was undoubtedly much faster than Jianshin. In just 2 breaths of time, the distance between them had been reduced to 20 meters. At this time, the light wind sword in Jianshin's hand once again turned into a bolt of lightning as it pierced towards the old man. Facing Jianshin's attack, the old man didn't dare to underestimate it, even though he was an Earth Saint Master. His body slightly swayed as he dodged the attack. As he dodged, the speed at which he was advancing slowed down a bit. The light wind sword immediately turned in midair and stabbed towards the old man from behind. The old man's eyes revealed a trace of anger. The hammer in his hand contained a large amount of Saint force as it smashed towards the light wind sword. The light wind sword nimbly turned and once again dodged the old man's attack. Boom! Because the old man had used too much strength in his attack, he was unable to retract his hammer. In the end, the hammer fiercely smashed into the ground, causing the Saint force contained in the hammer to explode and create a 2-meter deep crater. Jianshin retrieved the light wind sword and continued to run as fast as he could. Afterwards, this scene repeated itself over and over again. Jianshin continued to run as fast as he could while controlling the light wind sword to harass the old man from afar. This made it so that the old man was unable to catch up to him. This chase continued for a full 2 hours. When Jianshin reached the top of a mountain, he had no choice but to stop because he had reached a cliff. After running for 2 hours and using the light wind sword to harass the old man, Jianshin was almost completely exhausted. If it weren't for his strong willpower, he would have already collapsed. After all, using the light wind sword to control the sword was just too exhausting. Right now, Jianshin's clothes were completely dyed red from the blood flowing out of his wounds. Because he had used up too much of his energy, Jianshin's head was dizzy. He was like an ordinary person who hadn't slept for a few days and wanted nothing more than to fall asleep. Crap, this is actually a cliff. Forcing himself to not fall, Jianshin looked at the bottomless cliff in front of him and his heart sank. Finally, a trace of despair appeared in his eyes. He was not afraid of death, but he was extremely unwilling to die like this. At the same time, he still had his mother who loved him the most in this world, as well as his elder brother and sister who had once cared for him, Changyang Hu and Changyang Mingyue. "Bastard, die for me!" At this time, a furious roar came from behind. The old man, with the strength of an Earth Saint Master, quickly arrived behind Jianshin and viciously smashed his hammer into Jianshin's back. Pum! Jianshin was already completely exhausted, so he didn't have the strength to dodge the old man's attack. In the end, he was sent flying by the old man's hammer and fell into the cliff. The old man's face changed slightly when he saw Jianqin disappear from his sight. He had been blinded by his anger earlier, so he had failed to see the terrain clearly. As a result, only now did he discover that there was actually a bottomless cliff up ahead. Chapter 195. When Jianqin slowly opened his heavy eyelids, the blurry scene before him gradually cleared up. The first thing that entered his eyes was a roof made of earthen tiles. A few cracks in the roof were covered with spider webs. A few spiders were crawling around, enjoying the delicious food that was trapped in the spider webs. Jianqin's gaze subconsciously wandered around. Following that, the scene around him became clear to Jianqin's eyes. He saw that he was in a small room. The lighting in the room was rather dim, but he could still see the furnishings clearly. The furnishings in the room were very simple. Aside from a few wooden cabinets and a few small stools, there was nothing else. The floor was not completely made of marble. It was only made of hard, dry earth. What is this place? Looking at the scene around him, a trace of doubt appeared on Jianqin's tired face. Following that, he felt a slight pain in his head. Memories from before surged out from the depths of his mind like a tide, forming images that replayed in Jianqin's head. Jianqin vaguely remembered that after he was knocked off the cliff by the old man with the strength of an Earth Saint Master, he seemed to have fallen into the water and fainted. He had no idea what happened after that. I'm not dead. Looks like I was saved by someone. Jianqin quickly understood the situation before him. He immediately felt a small burst of excitement. In that situation back then, he had thought that he was dead for sure. He never thought that after falling off the cliff, he would still be alive. The Harito clan and the people who surrounded me in Fengyang City. I, Jianqin, will definitely not let you go. When Jianqin thought back to everything that had happened before, his eyes burned with hatred. He clenched his fists tightly. He had already committed the names of the dozen or so forces to memory. Just as Jianqin's body tensed up, a heart-wrenching pain came from his back. It was so painful that Jianqin could not help but let out a low groan. Even his face was slightly pale. After a while, when the pain passed, Jianqin took a deep breath. He lay on the bed and twisted his head to look at himself. He discovered that he had changed into a set of linen clothes. He could also clearly feel that the wounds on his body had been bandaged. However, when Jianqin's gaze landed on his waist, his expression suddenly changed. His space belt had actually disappeared. Where's my space belt? A trace of panic finally appeared in Jianqin's eyes. All of his belongings, including the Bai family's heirloom that his mother, Bai Yuntian, and the space ring that his father had given him, as well as the hundreds of thousands of purple crystal coins that he had obtained through various means, were all in his space belt. Now that he had lost his space belt, it was simply asking for his life. Furthermore, there were a large number of Class 4 monster cores and 2 Class 5 monster cores in the space belt. These were all important items that Jianqin could not lack for his cultivation. Jianqin's gaze wandered around the dimly lit room in a panic, trying to find his space belt. However, in the end, his face was filled with disappointment. He could not find even a shadow of his space belt. Just as Jianqin was about to lose his patience over the matter of his space belt, a series of footsteps came from outside the room. Then, with a creak, the wooden door of the room opened. A bare-chested middle-aged man wearing a pair of shorts walked in. This middle-aged man had a simple and honest face, but his appearance was very ordinary. As soon as the middle-aged man entered the house, when he entered the room, he saw that Jianqin had already woken up. He could not help but reveal a trace of a smile on his face. You're finally awake. You've been unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights. If it weren't for the fact that you're still breathing, I would have thought that you were already dead. Jianqin's gaze fell on the middle-aged man, and he immediately asked, "Where's my space belt?" Seeing Jianqin's anxious expression, the middle-aged man smiled. He then walked to a cabinet beside Jianqin, opened the cabinet's door, and took out an ordinary-looking space belt. Afterwards, he said to Jianqin, "I've always kept your space belt here. Kid, don't worry. We definitely won't touch your things." After saying that, he handed the space belt to Jianqin. Jianqin accepted the space belt and immediately checked its contents. Only after confirming that the important items were still there did he finally relax. Jianqin looked at the middle-aged man again. At this moment, his gaze towards the middle-aged man had become much gentler. He asked, "Did you save me?" The middle-aged man moved a stool over and sat beside Jianqin's bed. He chuckled. "2 days ago, when I went fishing in the river, I saw you floating in the water covered in blood. You were still alive, so I saved you." "Thank you for saving me." Jianqin looked at the middle-aged man gratefully as he spoke with great sincerity. The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "There's no need to thank me. Young man, you're really lucky. I can see that your injuries are so serious, but you're still alive. Especially your back, even your bones are exposed. I've lived for so long, but this is the first time I've seen someone survive such a serious injury." "Oh, right, kid, you've been unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights. Are you hungry? I'll get you something to eat," the middle-aged man continued. Jianqin nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you, uncle." After not eating for 2 days, Jianqin really was rather hungry. Afterwards, the middle-aged man scooped a bowl of rice and some meat for Jianqin. After eating, Jianqin's hunger was somewhat alleviated. Afterwards, he used rest as an excuse to get the middle-aged man to leave. After the middle-aged man left, Jianqin slowly closed his eyes and began to silently recover his exhausted spirit. In order to deal with the old man's pursuit, Jianqin had used the divine sword manipulation technique to almost exhaust his spirit. Although he had recovered a little after being unconscious for 2 days, it was still not of much use. Now he needed to recover his spirit to its peak before he could use the radiant, sacred stone to heal. The middle-aged man had come a few times while Jianqin was recovering, but he did not disturb him when he saw that Jianqin was asleep. Very soon night fell. Jianqin lay in bed for over 4 hours, but he did not move at all. It wasn't until the sun rose the next morning that Jianqin, who was lying on the bed with his eyes closed, finally woke up. After over a night of recovery, he had finally recovered 80% of his exhausted spirit. However, perhaps it was because he had overexerted himself 2 days ago, so it would be very difficult for his spirit to recover to its peak in a short amount of time without 2 or 3 days of recovery. Chapter 196. The dense, radiant saint force turned into a milky white light that enveloped Jianqin's entire body. As the milky white light turned into a strange energy that continuously entered Jianqin's body, the wounds on his body began to heal at a rate visible to the naked eye. Because it was currently daytime and because of the special nature of Radiant Saint Force, Jianqin wasn't afraid that the fact that he could control Radiant Saint Force would be leaked. Even if someone were to approach him while he was healing, he would be able to immediately sense it and stop controlling the Radiant Saint Force. Now that Jianqin's soul was much stronger than before, not only was the time he could control the Radiant Saint Force much faster, even the density of the Radiant Saint Force was much higher than before. As a result, after 5 hours of healing, his wounds were finally completely healed. However, Jianqin also paid a small price. His soul that had yet to return to its peak was almost completely drained. His head was so heavy that Jianqin couldn't even muster the slightest bit of energy. He wanted nothing more than to fall asleep immediately. Afterwards, Jianqin began to recover his soul. After a day and a night, he finally woke up the next morning. However, Jianqin didn't get out of bed and continued to rest. After all, the middle-aged man who had saved him before had already checked his wounds. It had only been 2 days, so if the middle-aged man learned that he had already recovered, he would definitely expose his identity as a Radiant Saint Master. After all, no matter how good the medicine was, it was impossible for him to recover from such severe wounds in just 2 days. Jianchen still didn't want to reveal his identity as a radiant Saint Master, so he would do his best to keep his other identity a secret. Unless he had no other choice, he wouldn't easily reveal it. This was because he was very clear that with the special status of a radiant Saint Master in the Tianyuan continent, once his identity was exposed, then there would be a lot of trouble. Lying on his bed, Jianchen silently recovered his Saint Qi. In the past 2 days, he had spent most of his energy on healing his injuries. Now his Saint Qi was completely empty. The light wind sword in his dantian was also dim. Soon it was noon. At this time, Jianchen could clearly smell the fragrance of food drifting in from outside the house. Creak! At this time, the wooden door suddenly opened. The middle-aged man who saved Jianchen walked in quietly and finally stopped in front of Jianchen's bed. The middle-aged man could not help but sigh as he looked at Jianchen, who was still lying on the bed with his eyes closed. He murmured to himself, "Sigh, you've been unconscious for another 2 days. You haven't eaten in the past 2 days, and you're so heavily injured. If this continues, I really don't know how much longer you can last. It's a pity that we're a poor mountain village, and we can't find any effective medicine." The middle-aged man helplessly shook his head as he turned around and walked out the door. "Uncle!" Suddenly, a weak voice called out from behind the middle-aged man. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's body slightly stiffened. He immediately turned around and looked at Jianchen, who was lying on the bed. His voice was filled with joy as he said, "Young man, you're finally awake. If you had been unconscious for a few more days, I was afraid that you would never wake up again." Hearing this, Jianchen's face revealed a trace of a smile as he said, "Sorry for making Big Tree worry." It's okay. It's good that you can wake up. At least your life is saved. By the way, you haven't eaten for 2 days. I'm sure you're hungry. I'll go get you something to eat." After saying that, the middle-aged man turned and walked out. Very soon, a bowl of steaming hot rice and a few plates of fried meat were brought in by the middle-aged man. He said, "We're only in a remote mountain village. The best thing to eat is the meat of the wild beasts that we usually hunt in the mountains. Now that you're injured, we've specially made some meat for you to nourish your body." "Thank you, Uncle." Saying this, Jianchen slowly climbed up from the bed. When the middle-aged man saw this, he hurriedly said, "Hey, don't move. You're injured, so it's easy to pull your wounds." As he said this, he put the food in his hands on the side of the cabinet and quickly went to support Jianchen. Jianchen smiled and said, "Although I'm a little injured after 2 days of recuperation, my injuries have basically stabilized. Just a little movement like this won't get in the way." Seeing Jianchen slowly sit up as if nothing had happened, the middle-aged man could not help but reveal a trace of envy in his eyes. He said, "Kid, your strength should be pretty good. Your back is so heavily injured, yet you can sit up in just a few days." Hearing this, Jianchen deeply glanced at the middle-aged man and smiled faintly. "Uncle, looks like you're not simple either. You must have once roamed the Tianyuan continent." "Sigh." The middle-aged man sighed. Jianchen's words seemed to have stirred up some painful memories. His face was filled with sorrow. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man slowly said, "Actually, over a decade ago, I was also a mercenary. I possessed the strength of a mid-Saint Master and traveled the continent with a few brothers who had gone through life and death together. However, ever since we came across a group of bandits while escorting some goods, my fate changed because of that. That group of bandits was very strong. After a bitter battle, although we managed to drive them away in the end, we also paid an extremely heavy price. As for my saint weapon, it was also destroyed in that battle by someone who was much stronger than me. Although I didn't die, I lost all of my abilities and became a cripple. In the end, I came to this small mountain village to live a life of peace." Jianchen fell silent for a moment when he heard that. He could completely understand the middle-aged man's feelings. Being reduced from a mercenary who had once roamed the continent to a cripple who could not use martial arts was definitely a torture worse than death for a man who once possessed great power and great ambitions. Afterwards, Jianchen ate his rice as he chatted with the middle-aged man. After a while, Jianchen learned the middle-aged man's name, Rothko. Rothko was already in his 40s. Ever since his saint weapon was destroyed and he became a cripple, he came to this small village by himself. After over a decade, he married a girl from a nearby village and gave birth to 2 children, 1 son and 1 daughter. They just happened to be 10 years old this year. Afterwards, Jianchen temporarily stayed in Rothko's home. However, he did not tell anyone that he had recovered. He locked himself in his room all day, using recuperation as an excuse so that Rothko would not disturb him when he had nothing to do. After that, he sat on his bed and continued to refine the saint force in his body. Although he had spent a few days refining the saint force in Fengyang City, Jianchen still had not completely dealt with the aftereffects of using monster cores to raise his strength too quickly. Chapter 197. Over 10 days later, Jianchen finally left the bed that he had been lying on for half a month. He stood on the ground with his feet bare. Jianchen lowered his head to look at the large linen clothes on his body. The linen clothes were clearly what Rothko usually wore. They were extremely large on Jianchen's body. Jianchen pulled out a set of clothes that he had prepared in the past from his space belt before taking off Rothko's clothes. However, just as Jianchen took off his clothes, he suddenly became stunned. He stared at his own skin in a daze. His skin was no longer as white and tender as it usually was. At this moment, the surface of his skin was dark red. It was an extremely strange sight. Looking at the color of his skin, Jianchen was stunned. An extremely strange expression appeared in his eyes. He was extremely puzzled by the condition of his body. A moment later, a thought suddenly flashed through Jianchen's head. He abruptly pulled up the information regarding his current condition from the depths of his memories. This is a sign that the poison resistance in the silver-striped golden snake's blood has completely fused with its body. Could it be that in the 10 days I've been lying in bed, my 10,000 poisons resistance has reached perfection? Jianchen cried out in surprise. His voice was filled with excitement and excitement. It had been more than a year since he had absorbed the poison resistance factor from the silver-striped golden snake's blood. His 10,000 poison resistance body had finally reached the perfect stage. Now his body could be called a true 10,000 poison resistance body. With this body of impenetrable body, as long as I don't come across any poison more potent than the silver-striped golden snake, I have nothing to fear. Jianchen was extremely excited. Among the countless poisons on the Tianyuan continent, the venom of the silver-striped golden snake definitely ranked in the top 10. Among the known poisons in the world, there were no more than 10 poisons that were more potent than the venom of the silver-striped golden snake, and every single one of these poisons was extremely rare. According to the books, when the body of impenetrable body reaches perfection, the entire body, including the face, will turn dark red. This will last for half a month to a month. After that, the color will gradually disappear and the skin will return to normal. Doesn't that mean that my face has completely turned dark red? Jianchen lowered his head and muttered to himself. It was a pity that he did not have a mirror right now. Otherwise, he really would have liked to look in the mirror and see if his face was dark red as well. After changing into the clothes he had taken out from the space, Jianchen folded up Rothko's linen clothes and placed them on a clean cabinet to the side before walking out. With a creak, Jianchen pushed open the slightly old wooden door. When the sunlight from outside shone in, the dim wooden hut finally had some light. Looking at the position of the sun in the sky, it should be almost noon. Outside the wooden hut was a small courtyard. The hard soil on the ground had already cracked like a spider web. Diagonally across from Jianchen, there were a few wooden huts. Further away, there were wooden huts of various sizes scattered around. The colors of the huts were somewhat old. A few young children were running happily in a spacious area. Their bell-like laughter could be heard constantly. Jianqin walked out of the wooden hut. This was the first time he had seen the environment here in the half a month that he had been here. This was a very remote village. Looking at it, one could almost see the entire landscape. Just from the number of huts, it could be seen that there were not many people living in this small mountain village. Rothko, today's harvest is really good. In just one morning, we have hunted 2 wild boars. This is enough for our entire village to eat for a few days. Yes, it seems like we don't have to go hunting tomorrow. We can just comfortably stay at home for 2 days and relax. It would be great if we have such good luck every day. This way, our future days will definitely be much more comfortable. At this time, Jianqin vaguely heard voices in the distance. When Jianqin looked over, he saw Rothko, who had saved him, and a few burly men walking over from afar. 2 of them were carrying huge wild boars on their shoulders. Looking at their heads, one of them weighed at least 100 kilograms. At this time, Rothko also noticed Jianqin standing in front of the door. He greeted from afar. "Hey, young man, have your injuries healed? You can even get out of bed and walk." Jianqin smiled and said, "Thank you for your concern, uncle. I have some good medicine with me. After recuperating for more than 10 days, my injuries have completely recovered." The few middle-aged men standing beside Rothko also noticed Jianqin at the same time. One of them immediately said with a smile, "Rothko, I heard that you saved a person from the river. Is that person you saved this little brother?" Rothko nodded with a smile. Soon, the few of them came to Jianqin's side. Rothko pointed at Jianqin and said, "This little brother is called Jianqin. Although he is young, you must not underestimate him. He has a tough life. I thought that he would not be able to live after such a serious injury, but I didn't expect that he would be standing here alive and well again after just 10 days. Just this point alone is not something we can compare to." "Oh, is that so? It seems that little brother Jianqin is also quite powerful." Hearing this, the other middle-aged men all smiled and said, they all looked very kind. Rothko then said to Jianqin, "Little brother, let me introduce you. These are the men of this village. This is Fang Yingang, this is Cheng Liran, and the last one is Qiu Chujie." Jianqin clasped his hands at them with a smile as a form of greeting. "You're back. Oh, it seems that your harvest today is quite good. You managed to hunt 2 wild boars in such a short time." At this time, a woman's voice came from not far away. A middle-aged woman wearing cotton clothes and a very ordinary appearance came out of a wooden house not far away. "Little brother, come, let me introduce you." Rothko put one hand on Jianqin's shoulder, and the other hand pointed at the middle-aged woman. He said, "This is my wife. Her name is Fang Hui." "Hello, sister-in-law." Jianqin greeted Fang Hui in a friendly manner. Although it was the first time that Jianqin saw Rothko's wife, he had heard Fang Hui's voice many times in the past 10 days. Fang Hui's eyes fell on Jianqin's face. She smiled and said, "What a handsome young man. I already knew that my Rothko saved a person from the river. Today is the first time I see you. I didn't expect you to be such a handsome young man. But why is your face so red?" "Yes, little brother, I also noticed that your face is getting redder and redder these days. Are you okay? Is there any sequelae from your injury?" Rothko asked with a puzzled face. "Don't worry, uncle. This is probably because of the medicine I used. I'm fine." Jianqin waved his hand casually. Chapter 198. Jianqin ate lunch with Rothko's family at an old wooden table in a clean wooden hut. The food was extremely simple. There were only a few plates of vegetables they had grown and a small plate of wild beast meat. There were only 4 people in Rothko's family. Other than the 2 of them, there were only 2 10-year-old children. The couple constantly chatted with Jianqin at the table, but they did not mention Jianqin's injuries or family matters. They only asked Jianqin about the current situation on the Tianyuan continent and some interesting matters. After all, the Tianyuan continent was extremely dangerous. Rothko's wife, Feng Hui, had grown up in a mountain village. She had basically never ventured out in the past few decades. As for Rothko, he had once been a mercenary, but ever since his saint weapon shattered and he became a cripple, he had remained in the mountain village for over a decade. He had never ventured out during that time, so he was extremely curious about the outside world. Jianqin had only ventured out for a year or two on the Tianyuan continent, and he had stayed in a small, remote town during that time, but he did not hide anything from the couple. He would answer their questions from time to time as well. After the meal, Jianqin strolled around the other parts of the village under Rothko's lead. He got to know many of the people who lived in the village, and he gained a better understanding of the place. This was a village called the Huang clan. It was said that it had existed for over 100 years. It had been founded by a person with the surname Huang 100 years ago. In the beginning, it only had a few people living in a small courtyard. Although it had developed over 100 years ago, it had only expanded to around 30 households. The total population was only around 100 people. Excluding the elderly, children, and frail women, there were only 30 or 40 strong young men. All the people in the village made a living by farming. Occasionally, there would be a few young men who would go to the nearby river to hunt some wild beasts or catch some fish from the nearby river. This was how they made a living, living a life that did not involve themselves in worldly affairs. Rothko walked through the entire village with Jianqin in the afternoon. He basically introduced everyone in the village to Jianqin, and they only finished in the evening. At night, Rothko returned home with Jianqin. The 5 of them sat at the same table and ate dinner. The dinner was extremely simple, consisting of a bowl of rice and some vegetables. At this moment, a boy beside Jianqin suddenly raised his head and looked at Jianqin. He said timidly, "Brother Jianqin, I heard from my father that you're very powerful, right?" The girl beside Feng Hui also raised her head when she heard the boy's words. She stared at Jianqin curiously with her large, black eyes. The boy's name was Luo Jia, and the girl had the exact same name as the boy, Luo Jia. They were Rothko's 2 children. Jianqin immediately turned to the boy upon hearing this. He smiled and said, "Little Jianqin, the outside world is very big, and there are countless people who are more powerful than me. Once you become more powerful, you'll be able to see the outside world." As soon as Jianqin finished speaking, Rothko's daughter, Luo Jia, couldn't help but ask, "Brother Jianqin, who is more powerful than my father?" Rothko chuckled when he heard this. He looked at his 2 children with a gentle gaze and said, "Jia Jia, don't underestimate Brother Jianqin. He may not be as old as me, but he's much more powerful than your father." Feng Hui's eyes immediately lit up when she heard that. She said to Jianqin, "Jianqin, if you don't mind our poverty, why don't you stay here? The Tianyuan continent is just too dangerous. Although life here is dull, it's still safe. I'll go to the village next door to find you a younger and prettier girl so you can get married." Jianqin bitterly smiled when he heard Feng Hui's words. Feng Hui's words were becoming more and more ridiculous. "Thank you for your good intentions, sister-in-law, but I still have many things to do outside, so I can't stay here for too long." Jianqin bitterly smiled. "That's enough. He has his own matters to attend to. A young man like him should spend more time on the Tianyuan continent because that's the stage for men." "Stop wasting time here," Rothko said. After all, he was once a mercenary who had roamed the Tianyuan continent before, so he was much more open-minded. Feng Hui angrily glared at Rothko. She also felt rather disappointed inside. She had thought that if she could keep Jianqin, who was stronger than her husband, in the village, the men of the village would be able to hunt even more in the future. After dinner, Jianqin returned to the wooden hut he had stayed in for a few days to rest. The hut had originally been used to store miscellaneous items, but Rothko had cleared it out due to Jianqin's arrival. He had even prepared a bed for Jianchen to rest on. Closing the rather old wooden door, Jianchen returned to the somewhat sturdy wooden bed and sat down. He then took out a few Class 3 monster cores from his space pouch and held them in his hands, immediately beginning to cultivate. In the past half a month, Jianchen had completely removed the hidden problems within his body, so he could increase his strength as much as he wanted now. He no longer needed to worry about increasing his strength too quickly and causing the problems within him to worsen. The energy within the monster cores was absorbed by Jianchen at an extremely terrifying rate. As soon as the energy entered Jianchen's body, the berserk factor within the energy was immediately absorbed by the 2 specks of light in his dantian, along with at least 80 to 90% of the energy. Perhaps it was because Jianchen was absorbing the energy much faster than before. Although the 2 specks of light in his dantian had absorbed most of the energy from the monster cores, Jianchen was able to receive 10 to 20% of the energy. It was no longer like when he had just become a saint, where he could only receive 1% of the energy. Chapter 199. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. By now, Jianchen had been in the Huang family village for more than a month. During this half a month, Jianchen rarely stepped out of his room. He locked himself in the wooden hut all day long and devoted himself to increasing his strength. He would only go out for a meal once every 3 or 4 days. Even so, he didn't stay outside for too long. As soon as he finished eating, he would immediately return to the wooden hut to continue cultivating. He rarely showed his face in front of outsiders. After half a month of cultivation, the saint force in Jianchen's body was growing at an extremely fast rate. At the same time, the monster cores in his space belt were being consumed at an extremely fast rate. Fortunately, he had already prepared enough Class 3 and Class 4 monster cores. Moreover, there were also some monster cores in the space belts that he had taken from the great Saint Masters in Fengyang City. Therefore, Jianchen didn't have to worry about running out of monster cores for a short period of time. Moreover, there were 2 Class 5 monster cores in his interspatial ring. Just these 2 Class 5 monster cores were enough to match up to over 100 Class 4 monster cores. With so many monster cores added together, it was enough to raise his strength to the great Saint Master level. Right now, Jianchen's strength had already reached the peak of the high-level Saint Master realm. There was only a thin barrier between him and the great Saint Master realm that was as thin as paper. At this final juncture, Jianchen stopped cultivating and slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, there was a trace of excitement in his calm eyes. He should have broken through to the great Saint Master realm more than a month ago. Unfortunately, because of the residual injuries in his body, he had no choice but to delay his breakthrough. Once he broke through to the great Saint Master realm, he would have enough power to take care of the Tianxiong clan in Wake City. Taking a deep breath, Jianchen slowly calmed his surging emotions. Then he took out a dozen Class 4 monster cores from his space belt. They were the size of a child's fist and placed them in front of his legs to prepare for his breakthrough. This was because at the critical juncture of his breakthrough, he would need an extremely large amount of energy. At that time, he wouldn't have the time to take out the monster cores from his space belt. Therefore, these things had to be prepared before he broke through. After everything was prepared, Jianchen held a Class 4 monster core in each hand and slowly closed his eyes to enter a state of cultivation again. In the blink of an eye, another day had passed. At noon, Rothko, his wife Feng Hui, and 2 children were sitting in the hut, eating lunch. Isn't Jianchen cultivating too hard? In the past half a month, he's only come out for a meal once every 2 or 3 days. I really don't know how he's able to endure it. It's already been 4 whole days, but Jianchen hasn't taken a single step out of his room. Sigh, I'm really worried that he'll fall sick from exhaustion. Looking through the door, Feng Hui shook her head and sighed as she looked at a small wooden house with a tightly shut wooden door not far away. Her tone actually carried a trace of worry. Rothko chuckled when he heard that You've never come in contact with Saint Force, so you'll never understand how wondrous Saint Force is. Jianchen really is working very hard on his cultivation, at least 100 times harder than I was in the past. But he'll never get sick from exhaustion. As for eating, there's no need to even mention it. On the Tianyuan continent, it's very normal for some powerful people to not eat for several days, or even weeks. When I was out on missions in the past, my companions and I didn't eat for 4 or 5 days, but we were still alive and well as we fought against bandits. Feng Hui pouted in disdain when she heard that. She said, "You are you and Jianchen is Jianchen. Don't forget that you were already in your 30s back then, while Jianchen was only in his early 20s. He was so skinny, so how could he compare to you?" Rothko gently sighed. You've never moved around the Tianyuan continent, so you don't know about this. Let me tell you, a person's strength has nothing to do with age. Some people with poor talent will never be able to condense a saint weapon and become a saint in their entire lives, while some people with good fortune and resources will reach heights that many mercenaries will never be able to reach in their entire lives. Take our village chief, for example. He's already over 150 years old this year, but he's only a great saint. He's already the most powerful person in our village. On the other hand, our village chief's strength has barely reached the standard to graduate from some of the academies on the Tianyuan continent. There are many people below the age of 30 who possess the strength of our village chief. Feng Hui nodded with some understanding. She said after some thought, "You're right, but Jianchen might not be that powerful. After all, he's far too young." After hearing Feng Hui's words, Rothko was about to continue defending himself when suddenly a gust of wind blew in from outside the house without any warning. It swept up a large amount of sand into the house, covering the few plates of vegetables on the table with sand and sand. Oh no! Why is there such a gust of wind all of a sudden? Rothko's face changed slightly, and he immediately ran over to close the door. Sob, 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 sob. Father, mother, sand has gotten into my eyes. I can't open them. Luo Jia covered her eyes as she sat at the table and sobbed. Feng Hui hurried over to Luo Jia's side and comforted her. "Good girl, don't cry. I'm here, so let me blow the sand away for you. Come, open your eyes." Rothko glanced back at the dishes on the table that were covered in sand. He hesitated slightly before sternly saying, "Stay in the room for now. I'll go out and take a look." This gust of wind came far too suddenly. There were no signs at all. It feels rather strange. With that, Rothko opened the door and walked out. The gust of wind continued to wreak havoc outside the room, kicking up dust into the air and blotting out the sun. Even the scorching sun in the sky was slightly dimmed by the thick layer of dust that had accumulated in the sky. Some of the clothes that had been hung outside had been blown high into the air by the gust of wind, where they danced in the wind. A large number of tiles on the roofs had been blown away. A few of the weaker wooden huts had even been blown apart by the gust of wind. What's going on? Why is there such a gust of wind all of a sudden? This gust of wind is so strange. It came all of a sudden, and it's so violent. In the distance, the villagers of the Huang village all walked out of their wooden huts. They were all extremely confused. Rothko casually looked around. When he accidentally glanced at Jianchen's hut, his eyes suddenly narrowed. This was because he suddenly discovered from the dust that the gust of wind seemed to be spreading out with Jianchen's hut as the center. Rothko, who had once roamed the Tianyuan continent and possessed the strength of a saint master, quickly deduced the truth from this phenomenon. His eyes immediately widened as he stared at Jianchen's hut in disbelief. He involuntarily cried out, "Is this caused by Jianchen's cultivation?" At that moment, Rothko's heart churned. He understood extremely well just how much strength was required to cause something like this. At the very least, he was nowhere close to being able to do something like this when he was a saint master over a decade ago. What filled him with even more disbelief was that Jianchen had already surpassed him in the past when he was only in his early 20s. I really was mistaken. The kid's strength is definitely greater than a Saint Master. He's probably a great Saint Master at the very least, Rothko sighed. Although he had become a cripple now, he still possessed his past experience, so he was able to estimate Gentian's strength immediately. Everyone look. The gale seems to be blowing in that direction. An old voice vaguely rang out from the distance. A white-haired old man pointed in the direction of Gentian's hut. With that, the others all turned their heads in the direction of Gentian's hut. Someone immediately said, "The chief is right. The gale is indeed blowing in that direction. Look, the dust in the air is spreading in all directions. Let's go and take a look. Yeah, let's go and see what's going on." Afterwards, the group of people followed the village chief to Jian Chen's wooden hut. Rothko discovered their arrival as soon as possible. He hurriedly ran over to stop them and said, "Chief, let's not go over right now. We don't want to disturb Jian Chen." "Rothko, what's going on?" "The gale seems to be blowing out from that hut," the chief said to Rothko. The village chief asked Rothko. His voice was filled with doubt, and his wrinkled old face was also very solemn. "Yeah, Rothko, what's in that hut? It can't be hiding some kind of treasure, right?" Someone immediately followed after the chief. "Yeah, Rothko, you're too unkind. You found a treasure, but you won't even let us take a look. Hurry up and take out the treasure so we can see it. I've never seen a treasure that can blow out wind before." Following that person's words, the others also thought that there must be some kind of treasure hidden in that hut, so they all started to make a ruckus. "Shoo, shoo, everyone be quiet." Rothko hurriedly made a shushing gesture. After everyone quieted down, he lowered his voice and said innocently, "Please don't misunderstand everyone. I don't have any treasure. This is clearly caused by Jianchen cultivating in that hut. According to my previous experience, this phenomenon should only appear when Jianchen reaches the most crucial moment of his cultivation. He should be most afraid of being disturbed at that moment, or there will be very serious consequences. It will be very disadvantageous for Jianchen. Let's go, let's all stay away and not disturb Jianchen's cultivation." "Oh, so that's how it is. That's impossible. I've seen Jianchen before. Why haven't I noticed that he's so powerful? He actually has the ability to summon wind and rain." "Rothko, you're not lying to us, are you?" Everyone questioned. After all, they had all grown up in a mountain village. They had never been to the Tianyuan continent before, so many of them doubted Rothko's words. They did not believe that someone younger than them would possess such great ability. What they were witnessing right now was already an impressive ability in their eyes. The old village chief stared at Jianchen's hut for quite a while. Deep shock filled his eyes as well. He then sighed deeply and turned around. "Everyone, Rothko's words make a lot of sense. We'll know whether or not it's the same as what Rothko has said later. Let's stay away for now so that we don't disturb Jianchen." The old village chief clearly possessed great prestige in everyone's hearts. With his words, everyone immediately stopped talking and silently backed away. They only stopped when they were 50 meters away. They all stood there and stared at Jianchen's hut. The wind continued to wreak havoc in the surroundings, but it did not cover a large area. It only covered a radius of a few hundred meters, which was just enough to envelop the entire village. The crowd watched from 50 meters away for nearly an hour. During this time, even some of the old and frail people, as well as some women and children, left their houses one after another to watch what was happening here with curiosity in the face of the flying sand and sand. At this moment, almost all of the over 100 residents of the Huang village who were still able to move had gathered here to witness a scene that they had never seen before. If this happened on the Tianyuan continent, it might not have attracted the attention of anyone, but it was extremely novel in this isolated mountain village. Why do I feel more and more uncomfortable? It's so uncomfortable that even breathing is becoming extremely difficult. An old man suddenly rubbed his chest as he asked in confusion. "Yes, I also feel very stuffy in my chest. It's so stuffy that I feel flustered. Moreover, I feel like I'm carrying something very heavy on my back." As soon as the old man finished speaking, a middle-aged man standing beside him also spoke up. "Me too. My chest feels stuffy, as if there's a huge rock pressing down on my chest. I can't breathe." "That's strange. You guys also feel the same way?" "I thought it was because I was feeling unwell somewhere." "I also feel the same way. I have one too." Rothko was surprised when he heard everyone's discussion. He then seemed to think of something, and his face changed slightly. He immediately called out, "Everyone back off. This is an invisible presence that only powerful people can give off. It will directly affect the people in the surroundings. Some peak experts can even directly suffocate people to death with just their presence alone." Everyone's faces changed drastically when they heard Rothko's words, including the old village chief. They backed off in a hurry, only stopping when they were 100 meters away. Many of them had no idea what a presence was, but they had clearly heard that a few peak experts could directly suffocate people to death with just their presence alone. Bang! Just when everyone had retreated to 100 meters away, a loud sound suddenly rang out. Jian Chen's wooden hut was instantly smashed to pieces, and then a figure smashed through the roof and shot into the sky like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, he flew 50 meters into the air. Ah! Jian Chen floated 50 meters in the air and let out a long roar. The sound waves rolled out, spreading far and wide. Then, powerful and surging Saint Force gathered in his left hand. With a wave of his hand, a pure ball of light made of Saint Force flew out of his hand, whistling towards the ground in the distance. Boom! When the ball of energy hit the ground, it let out a loud boom, accompanied by a large amount of smoke and dust that slowly rose from the ground. When the smoke and dust dissipated, to everyone's shock, there was already a 2 to 3 meter wide and 5 meter deep crater. Surging Saint Force once again surged out of Gentian's right hand, quickly condensing into a silver-white long sword. Under the illumination of the sun, the long sword reflected a dazzling light, making people not dare to look at it directly. This long sword seemed to be even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. With a flash of silver light, the long sword pierced through the air with lightning speed. A sharp sword chi with a dazzling light broke free from the longsword shackles and shot into the ground a few 100 meters away. It silently sank into the hard ground, leaving only a very small crack on the surface. There was not a single crack in the surrounding area. After this stab, Jianchen's body slowly landed on the ground. Although he could reach a height of 50 meters in a single leap, he could only stay in the air for less than a breath of time.